Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Dedicated Hearts made Fullmetal in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 46, The Final Preparations. Ed lifted his hands up as he caught the kick Mina swung at him, throwing her leg to the side as she too was thrown off balance. She stumbled slightly as Ed moved his hands back into position. That was better, Ed said, but you're focusing on power than placement. I get wanting to go for the knockout blow, Ed said, pointing at his jaw, but you have to break down your enemy first. Only go for the big blow when there's a clear opening. What would a clear opening look like? Mina asked. When they're on their last legs and won't counter any big hits, Ed replied, demonstrating it by wobbling his body. Or if they go for a desperate attack. Ed stopped as he faked an obvious attack. Mina stepped to the side, attempting to dodge. But you have to be the one to decide that. Go with your gut. But I'm getting better, right? Mina asked. Yeah, much better, Ed replied, as if stating the obvious. Your technique at times is pretty good too. Were you lying when you said that you were about mid-table of your class in hand-to-hand? He suggested jokingly. No, that's the truth, Mina replied, but to be honest I think the memories are helping me. Oh, no, I see, Ed replied, nodding his head slightly. To the side there was a loud thud as Alphonse threw Aaron to the ground. You okay? Alphonse asked almost immediately. Yeah, wasn't expecting you to flip me over like that, Aaron replied with a joking smile. Aaron dusted himself off. I never asked, but how did you guys learn to fight? Wouldn't being alchemists take up your time? Guess we were lucky to have a teacher who knew how to do both, Edward replied. Taught us from a young age, really beat her lessons in us. Literally, Alphonse added, the number of times teacher had thrown us to the ground. So she was like an army instructor? Mina asked. She'd be pretty pissed if you compared her to that, Ed commented as he and Alphonse began to reminisce. When she found out I joined the military back home, she kicked me so hard she sent me flying down her path. But she was intense with her lessons though, Alphonse continued. She left us on an island for a month with nothing but a knife. What? Both Aaron and Mina said in unison, shocked by the revelation. Oh yeah, she wanted us to both fend for ourselves and learn the fundamental lesson of alchemy, all is one and one is all, Ed said, rubbing the back of his head. Took eating ants to understand that, he said with a silly smile. Both Mina and Aaron looked at him, shocked and confused. I didn't do that, Alphonse added. Thankfully. Erwin sat idly by the open lake. A large notebook sat on his lap as he continued to scribble down the ideas and preparations he needed to make for the expedition soon. The sounds of soft quacks caught his attention as he moved his eyes to see a white duck picking through the grass as it pulled out and devoured a small insect. Oi! Came a voice from behind him. Erwin turned his head back slightly to see Levi standing off to the side of the bench. They're ready for you. Erwin closed his book and stood up. Good, Erwin replied. It will be nice to see some old faces. The two walked up the path on a small slope towards a large mansion, formerly owned by a member of the landed autocrats who was uprooted after the uprising. A large fence surrounded the building with an excessively large garden hugged closely to the building with bushes, roses, and lilies. The house was made of a washed-colored orange brick with a large gray stone tower at the side connected to the mansion. Windows decorated the mansion covered with white curtains. The mansion looked to be 3 stories high with pointed roofs crowning the building. The wooden double doors opened for both Erwin and Levi as Hang came to greet them with a small number of staff. Hang jogged towards them, a massive grin on her face. I can't wait for you to see it, Erwin, she said, barely containing her excitement. A dark wooden flooring was covered in a large red carpet and dark wood furniture, chairs, and tables, hugging the red walls of the house, all of which were no doubt the previous owner's belongings. You must be so proud, Hang, Erwin remarked. Your work with Automail helped make this happen. The 3 walked up to the staff. Welcome, Commander, a member of staff greeted. They were all dressed in medical scrubs with a few carrying clipboards and folders. I'm honored to welcome you here to the first Automail Recovery Center. The staff led them along, first to a large room packed with groups of people huddled around others dressed in scrubs or mechanical wear as they showed them metal limbs while they measured people with missing limbs. This is the consultation room. Patients and their families are informed of the process. Lot of people here. Levi remarked, surprised you have the capacity. We don't. The staff member stated. All of them will be placed on a waiting list for now. The process of attaching the auto-male limbs is painful and the rehabilitation is grueling. You've been handling the rehabilitation well though, aren't you, Erwin? Hang asked. Yes, I must be lucky, I haven't experienced the intense discomfort that came with healing. Erwin replied. Yeah, very lucky. Levi repeated, eyeing Erwin. The staff moved them through the halls, some patients wandering around, some limping, as they adjusted to the new limb. Most of our equipment comes entirely from the Reeves Company, as are the engineering staff. The staff member informed them, though truth be told most of us are learning on the job about auto-male, these kinds of surgeries and procedures are unfamiliar to us. Comes with the territory with this new technology. Heng stated, I hope more centers like these are built. Though we have you to thank, Commander. The staff member, you being the first auto-male user in the walls, your experience have provided a handy guide on the surgery itself, though the downside to you not experiencing any intense pain did leave us a bit unprepared for others. Erwin remained quiet for now. He looked down at his arm. He could make out the misshapen figure that reflected off the metal arm as he moved his fingers. Hopefully it'll be available for other people too, even civilians got those limbs back on the Elric's world. Levi remarked. A lone patient walked up to them, limping slightly as he tried to walk with his new leg. Their fist clenched as they tried to walk straight. Commander, they said. Erwin stared at them for a few seconds. Joseph, Erwin said, recognizing the patient. The patient fell slightly as they grabbed Erwin's arms. Erwin held them up. Please. The patient muttered, if you meet those two, the Elrics, can you give them my thanks? I owe them a lot for this. Moblet along with Nifa stood in a small wooden observatory with telescopes in hand. To the side was what Moblet thought looked like a cannon. It was nothing like Moblet had seen before. Its barrel was narrower and longer compared to the ones mounted on the walls. It had black metal wheels. At the end of the barrel was a more pronounced snout, and near the breech of the cannon was a metal guard with a small rectangle hole which separated the barrel from the rest of the cannon. This was based off the design of cannon from Ames Tries. They both watched as a member of the garrison began to load a shell into the cannon. Even the ammunition was different. It looked like a shotgun shell but curved at the end with a golden tip, smaller than a regular cannonball. There was a loud clang sound as the garrison troop shut the hatch of the cannon. Ready! Yelled the garrison troop. Moblet turned his head towards the large dummy Titan a few miles away from them. Both he and Nifa peered through their telescopes at the Titan. There was a loud bang as the long barrel of the cannon retracted slightly and a subdued explosion of light was contained within the snout. A large explosion of yellow and orange engulfed the dummy Titan before a thick cloud of gray smoke covered the damage. Target hit! Yelled one of the garrison troops watching. They all watched in anticipation as the smoke began to clear before them. There were gasps and exclamations from those watching as the smoke cleared from the Titan body. Oh my God! Nifa muttered as she lowered the telescope from her eye. Moblet was almost equally shocked by the result. Everything above the stomach of the Titan was gone, its parts scattered across the field far from the rest of the body. Moblet quickly placed down his telescope onto the ground as before he began to scribble notes onto a piece of paper resting on a wooden board. Prepare the next shot, ordered one of the garrison troops. This cannon, this pretty much shits on the previous ones. The troops commented. How the hell can something like this cause that much damage? Looking at the artillery shell. I don't know, but with this, I'm sure we can't lose. Ed heaved as he carried the boxes of equipment off the barn. He dug the heels of his shoes into the dirt as he walked forward towards the wide entrance of the barn before quickly placing it down onto the grass. He wiped off the sweat that ran down his forehead with his hand before sighing. I thought Winry ran me ragged. Ed muttered. Hey! Yelled a voice behind him. He turned around to see Historia chasing after some small children as they ran off laughing from her. Ed watched the scene and smiled. Queen of humanity. He chuckled. He thought back to that moment in the cave when she stood up to her father, the emotions of the moment, so different from the person there. The kids then ran towards a small crowd of kids as they watched Alphonse demonstrate alchemy to them. Historia stopped chasing them as she marched up to Aaron, Jean, and Armin, who were leaning up against the fence. "Hey, you're slacking off," she yelled at them. "Carry all this stuff before the sun goes down." She turned her head forward to see Ed watching her. "You too, Ed?" Ed rolled his eyes as he jogged towards them. "She's starting to remind me of my mom," Jean muttered as he picked up one of the boxes. "A real goddess, huh?" Armin replied. Ed tried to pick up as much as he could, sacks of grain piled upon two wooden boxes. He followed behind them. "You okay there, Ed?" Jean asked. "I'm fine," Ed replied. "You go on ahead." He couldn't see them through the objects in front, but he heard their footsteps quickly scattered as he labored over carrying the boxes over to the barn. He had made it halfway to the barn when someone in front of him lifted up one of the boxes off him. As the box moved from his vision, he saw Historia looking at him. "You could hurt yourself doing that," she said matter-of-factly. "I've done worse," Ed commented. "Carrying some boxes is about the least reckless thing I've ever done." They continued to walk. "I thought you were with Aaron." "Mikasa's with him," Historia replied. "She's taken the sacks he was carrying and Aaron took the other box off my hands, so I thought I'd help you." "Thanks for that," Ed replied. "Aaron told me about the hardening experiments, said that both he and Mina were making good progress on it," Historia mentioned. "Yeah, Mina is still getting the hang of being a Titan shifter, but she's doing pretty well," Ed replied. "Sucks she can't be here. She looked upset about not being able to see how you and the orphanage was doing." "So where are you guys going from here?" Historia asked. "We've got a trip to Trost after our visit here," Ed replied. "Hang wants to try and put together the Titan traps around the district, and Reeves wants us to be there for the opening for the hydroelectric plant." "Sounds exciting," Historia replied. "All the technology you and Alphonse help make, people are excited about it. I just hope we don't run into some of the crazies," Ed mentioned. "Ever since the coronation, Al and I keep getting people walk up to us asking about God or something, some even kneel in front of us." Ed shuddered slightly. "I take it you hate that kind of thing," Historia remarked. "I've seen where that kind of thing can take people," Ed replied. "It's nothing good." "Are you staying with the others in Trost until the operation?" Historia asked. "I'd like to, but it's likely we'll be moved around from now until then." Ed whined softly. "After our business in Trost we have to meet Darius and the higher-ups in Ermich. You know what it's about?" Historia asked. "I was hoping you do," Ed replied almost jokingly. "Probably something related to the army or new weapons." They approached the barn door, a large pile of sacks and wooden boxes inside the barn just off to the side. Ed placed the boxes down with Historia on the pile. "Ed, are you and Alphonse ready for the operation?" Historia asked. "We are," Ed replied, looking out of the barn, his eyes wandering off into the sky. "I don't want to sound arrogant when I say this, but we've been ready for something like this since the day we got here." Hang observed the large Titan killing contraption before them. The two walls which stuck out from the walls, both 50 meters tall and 10 meters wide, were extended out by almost 20 meters and more than 10 meters apart. Between the two walls was a large platform which was suspended in the air by large chains holding it and preventing it from falling onto the ground by 4 cranes on each side. Sticking out of the walls were 2 cranes holding large crystal cages with thin gaps in between the bars. Hang leaned forward, getting a better look. The line of rectangle-shaped holes in the walls caught her eyes as scout troops standing on the edge of the holes as a few Titans on the outside clawed at them. So this large platform would drop on their heads and crush whoever's inside? Levi asked. "That's the idea," Hang replied. "The original idea was a sort of guillotine-like contraption, but with Ed and Al's help we managed to expand that. And I see Arlert's idea got the go-ahead," Levi remarked, looking at Armin, who stood by next to Aaron and Mina. "You must be proud." "Of course, Captain," Armin replied. "It's just a shame that Edward and Alphonse couldn't be here to see it. That reminds me, we have to go see that hydroelectric plant they're opening with Reeves. Shame that the scheduling clash." Hang turned her head back to the contraption, "But first let's see Armin's invention in action." The crane slid to the left slightly as it was angled just on the direction of the Titan's head. A garrison soldier dropped down and fires their hook onto the wall, sitting underneath the cage before looking down at the Titan. They swing to the side, their hand pointed to the operator. The operator pulls a lever before the cage fell down onto the Titan. There was a loud thud and a subdued yell by the Titan before the cage was being raised from the ground, the chains holding the cage from the top clanging slightly as it was reeled back. They all watched with anticipation. As the Titan came into view, so did a slight trail of smoke. "No, don't tell me," Hang muttered. "Did it work?" An onlooker asked. Hang turned to look at Armin. He looked calm and collected despite the anxiety and curiosity. Hang turned back and pulled out a telescope, peering into it for a better look. The Titan lay there still. "Kman, be alive, come on you beautiful monster." The Titan's hand began to grab at the bars, its fingers sticking out between the gaps. "It's alive!" Hang exclaimed. There was a low roar from the Titan as it tried to stand up. "It's worked!" Hang exclaimed, looking at Armin. He still looked calm, just with a small smile on his face as his friends congratulated him. A green flare was shot by one of the scouts standing inside the hole in the wall. "That's the signal," Hang said to the others, "the other trap ready." A chaotic clanging of large chains echoed across the area as the large platform between the two walls collapsed onto the ground. "Boom. Nothing could have survived that," Aaron commented. There were a few seconds of silence before the low and slow rumbling and clanging of metal chains filled the silence as the platform was raised slowly from the ground. Hang and the others leaned in further, as the platform passed by the holes in the wall and mass cloud of thick gray smoke began to pour out, rising from the ground. There looked to be some commotion by the scouts watching from the large hole in the wall when another flare was fired off, a green trail of smoke reaching up and past the rising clouds. "It's worked," Hang declared excitedly. There was a loud cheer from the onlookers. "We can kill Titans en masse now without the risk of losing men." She turned towards the press watching. "Spread the word. Spread the good news to humanity." She turned to Aaron and Mina excitedly. "We did it, you guys. Now that we know it works, we can bring it to the other districts." "That's great, squad leader," Aaron replied. "Whatever you ask, we'll be happy to help." Mina added until Levi interjected. "You two, your noses are bleeding," the single red trail of blood running down one of their nostrils, both of them touching just above their lip to find a thin red line. "What's happening?" Mina asked, slightly concerned. "This has happened before," Aaron said as he wiped away the blood off. "Don't worry about it, last time it happened to me was in Trost. That was when you were constantly using your Titan," Armin added. "Looks like they've being pushed close to their limits," Levi said. "Good thing this whole thing was spread out between them." Hang sighed. "I'm sorry about this." Hang apologized. "I should have been more aware of this." "We're fine, Hang," Aaron reassured her. "Yeah, we've had worse," Mina added. "A slight nosebleed is really nothing. This is a big step towards winning the fight against the Titans and to not lose anyone in future. We'll clear out Wall Maria sooner than possible," Aaron declared. Erwin sat alone in his office, once more staring outside the window as he watched from a distance as people carried on with their lives. He looked down at an open pocket watch sitting on his desk. They should be here any minute now. He checked his long brown coat, looking for any imperfections one last time. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Erwin said. The door opened as Ian Dietrich, followed by Mitabi Jarnach and Rico Bertsinska, walked in. "Welcome," Erwin greeted them, standing up. Three saluted him. "Please take a seat." The three sat down at the desk, on the three empty chairs facing him, Ian sitting between the two others. "Thank you for coming to meet me on such short notice." "It was no trouble, Commander," Ian replied. "I'm sure you know why I've asked you to meet with me," Erwin stated. "We know. Pixis gave the word out to other captains to see if there would be any battalions willing to bolster your forces for the coming expedition." "Yes, that would be correct," Erwin replied. "As it stands, the scouts are comfortable over 200 strong, however that would be including those new recruits from the 104th and those soldiers who are possibly on course finish their initial automail before the expedition. So in truth, you may have less than 200 soldiers who you're confident in," Rico pointed out. In truth, yes. Irwin admitted, while not ideal, this will possibly be humanity's defining battle in our war against the Titan, and we can't afford to pull our punches. If you don't wish to join us, then this is the course of action I will take. Irwin paused for a second. Are you willing to join us? They were silent for a few seconds, Ian turning his head to both his subordinates as if to gauge their reactions. Yes. I've already discussed it with them and we're generally in agreement. However, we need to know what we're getting ourselves into. However, we need to know what you have planned for us. Midabi inserted. Rumors going around the garrison that you'll use the however signs up for the expedition as cannon fodder to save your own men. Rest assured that is not what I have planned for our garrison volunteers. Irwin told them, your role would be to act as support and provide all-round defense. Irwin turned to the side. Looking down, he pulled out a drawer in his desk and took about a folded map. Unraveling onto the table, it was a map of Shiganshina. Your role will be to hold the village around the interior entrance to the district, he said, placing 4 red blocks on the north, east, west and center of the village, or to help organize a siege of the district should the enemy try to hold it. He then moved the red blocks out of the city and towards the outskirts of the village. If you're planning on using us as such, then we'll need to bring cannons with us too. Rico suggested. That is more than possible. Irwin replied, quite recently we've developed a new cannon from the blueprints Edward Elric has provided us. From our reports, the tests have proven to be effective and exceeding the capabilities of our previous design. Irwin told them. We can effectively carry out those tasks. Ian stated. So you'll need 4 platoons. Indeed, 4 platoons numbering 20 men each would suffice. Irwin clarified. If that's the case, then we'll need 1 more officer to take charge of a 4th platoon. Midabi stated. Problem with that is that other officers in the garrison aren't going to take up your proposition. Irwin lowered his head slightly to the table as she placed his hand over his clenched fist and pondered. Yes, I guess that is a problem. His mind searched through a list of names, crossing out those who he believed would reject until. Perhaps there is someone who might be willing to take up their position. You know someone who would join us? Ian asked. Yes, I'll write a letter asking them to join. Irwin replied. You're gonna have to be really convincing. Midabi remarked. I think I can do that. Irwin replied with a small confident smile. We can beat them. Marlowe exclaimed excitedly as he slammed his mug onto the table, catching the others' attention. We can beat them. Those spears and the new artillery will make short work of the Titans, even those shifters won't stand a chance against that. He turned his head towards Edward and Alphonse, who sat opposite to Marlowe, and then to Aaron and then Mina, who sat next to him, and we'll have the Elrics and 2 of our own shifters on our side. Spoken like a person who's never been in a fight a Titan before. Jean remarked. And you're putting way too much stock into the idea that neither of those 4 won't bit the dust, no offense. None taken, Ed chuckled. We aren't invincible after all. When you think about it, the amount of times we were lucky or had close calls is pretty concerning. Alphonse remarked. But still. With all these advantages, how can we not win? Marlowe asked. You really do sound like someone who is new to all this. Jean said with a frustrated look on his face. Look around, nobody here is excited for it. Jean waved his thumb around, emphasizing his point. The room was filled with mumbling, laughter and chatter of the garrison troops of the district, but among them were scouts sitting silently as they ate their meals. Guess you're right. Marlowe said, quietening down. Listen, you can sit out of the expedition if you want. Jean told him, those garrison men from Ian's company will fill the gaps in our ranks that was meant for the recruits and the rehabilitating scouts. There'll be other expeditions. I can't do that. Marlowe replied, almost declaring it. I joined the scout regiment because I wanted to best serve humanity, and that's exactly what I'll do, even if I have to sacrifice myself for the cause. Marlowe, those words may sound noble, but please remember you have people waiting for you. Don't leave them like that. Alphonse said. His words sat heavily with those at the table as they grew quiet for a second. Yeah, think about Hitch. Sasha added. You got to go back to her someday. Why would I do that? Marlowe asked. Well, you know. Sasha said teasingly as Connie tried to stifle in a laugh. I don't understand what you mean, but Hitch did try to stop me from joining and trying to berate me. Marlowe replied. She said since we were recognized by the revolution we could live an easy life in the military police. It's a shame really, I thought better of her until then. I told her that I had the wrong impression of her. It was only until his last word was uttered when he noticed the glares he was getting. Piece of shit, Jean spat. I really want to hit you. Mina said, glaring at him. Are you stupid? Armin asked. Bowl-cut bastard. Sasha insulted. But I don't understand. Marlowe hasn't done anything wrong. They turned their heads to Aaron, who stared at them. What? Marlowe, I've had to work with some very dense materials and objects in my life, but you probably rank second in that list. Hey. Marlowe exclaimed. Aaron ranks first. Ed continued. Wait, what? Aaron exclaimed. Ed began to laugh at their reaction. Quickly Jean followed, and the Connie, then Sasha, Mina, Alphonse, Armin, then Marlowe, and then Aaron, and even Mikasa. After a while Connie got up from his seat. I should get going, he said. Why? Tomorrow is a day off, so take it easy. Sasha replied. Yeah, that's why I was hoping to use tomorrow to head over to my village. Connie explained. I might be able to learn something new too, he said, as he picked up his plate and left. Good night. You too. Armin replied as everyone else nodded at him. Do you guys think it's possible to turn Connie's mother back into a human again? Sasha asked, throwing the question out there. I don't know, but if there is a possibility then we should try. Alphonse replied, if we can then we could turn others back. Do you guys remember what it was like to just be a Titan but not a shifter? Sasha asked both Aaron and Mina. No. I can't remember a single thing about being just a Titan. Aaron said, looking down onto the table. Me neither. Mina added, the only thing I remember about my Titan was what Annie saw. His voice shook slightly. I think it's best you guys don't think about it. Ed quickly interjected. Probably wouldn't want to remember something like that anyways. Maybe you're right. Aaron replied as he continued to look down at the table as if in deep thought. Brother, we should get going too, Alphonse said, standing up from the table. We have to head out too. Darius wanted to meet us about something in Ermich district. What's the meeting about? Armin asked. Probably something to do with more weapons ideas. Ed replied, disgruntled, as he picked up his plate and pushed in his chair with his foot. We'll see you guys soon, Alphonse said. Yeah, have a nice trip, Mina said. Both Edward and Alphonse walked away, dropping their plates into a shelf before exiting the mess hall. They entered into a hallway. Hey, said a voice from behind them. They both turned around to see a group of people dressed in scout uniform approach them. Please don't be another group of crazies, Ed muttered. Brother, Alphonse muttered back as if to chastise him. They both looked at the group, however one of them caught Ed's eye, the guy in front of the group who looked to be just a few centimeters taller than them and had a very curly blonde hair. Hey, I've seen you before, Ed said as them came close to them. You were at that memorial service. I'm surprised you remember me, the guy replied, a cold expression on his face. Do you remember all the faces of those who died for you or fought alongside you? The question caught them completely off guard. What about you, Alphonse, do you remember us? I'm afraid I don't, Alphonse replied as politely as possible, the tension rising. It must be hard to count the dead you could have saved, said a person in the group. What did you say? Ed growled back. Step forward and say that to our faces. I'm sorry you feel that way, Alphonse said, trying to defuse the situation. His voice sounded almost restrained, like he was holding back. We fought alongside you, Alphonse, the guy at the front stated, back at the castle with the Southern 104th. You were there with us. Do you ever wonder if you could have done more? That's enough, Ed stated with an unforgiving tone. Just who the hell are you anyways? Floche, the guy at the front of the group replied with a stern tone. You must think that everyone in the army and the walls loves you. He stated almost venomously, the higher-ups are willing to throw men to their deaths to protect you when you could help yourself and that you could get away with anything. What makes you think we would believe that? Alphonse questioned, frustration seeping through. You think your little stunt with Mina went unnoticed in the regiment? In the other corps? We don't care if she was meant to inherit it, but we know that it got swept under the rug, and you, he said, looking at Alphonse. Got away with breaking rank, one rule for us and another for you too, is that how it is? No, it isn't. Ed replied. And you better back off now. There was a few seconds of silence as both Edward and Alphonse stared down the group and Floche. Fine, just remember that cannon fodder like us have grievances too. The group walked past them as both Ed and Al continued to watch. Both Edward and Alphonse sat outside in the hallway as they waited to be summoned into the room. Ed leaned to the side with his arm resting on the armrest of the chair as his back slumped into the chair as Alphonse sat straight diligently. What's taking so long? Ed whined slightly. He pulled out his pocket watch and pushed down on the button, taking out the picture and looking at the time. All right, 8 minutes past 7. Be patient, Alphonse said, his hands gripping his knees. Ed leaned forward. Hey Al, I know I said this on the way here, but, are you okay? He asked. Those guys back at Trost, they didn't get to you? Alphonse turned his head towards Ed. No, I'm fine. He replied as if trying to wave it off. No point in dwelling on that. Suddenly the door next to Ed opened as an MP greeted them. The Premier will see you now. Both Edward and Alphonse got up from their chairs and entered into the room. There was a long table before them filled with empty seats opposite to Darius and the others who filled the other side. The room was brightly lit with the rocks that were mined from the cavern under Rice Family Chapel. Premier, Alphonse said as he saluted him. Ed followed. At ease, Darius said. Edward, Alphonse, Elric, please take a seat. They both pulled out their chairs just opposite of him. Thank you for coming to this meeting at such short notice. We know you must be busy, what with the expedition coming up. Can't exactly refuse a meeting with you, Premier, Edward replied, stating the obvious. I guess you can't, Darius replied. You are a part of our armed forces until the day you decide to leave. A sad day that will be. Oh, the things we could do if only we all had more time with you, and the people who will miss you and what you've done for them. Some papers were then being passed out among those sitting on the opposite side of the table, leaving out Edward and Alphonse. With your knowledge and, more importantly, your alchemy, we have gone leaps and bounds in what we thought possible. I guessing you want us to stay here permanently, Ed said, reading between the lines. Sorry to break it to you, but that's just not happening. Yes, we know all about your goals and ambitions, Darius replied. A deal with God in exchange for your deceased loved ones. I could never ask you two to stay here forever, but we can't lose your alchemic knowledge too, so I'm asking. Darius then handed them the paper that had been handed out among the other officials. Just like you've trained squad leader Hang Zoe and Armin Arlert, you train the first generation of alchemists of this world and help create a new branch of the army, an alchemist corps. Both Edward and Alphonse were dumbstruck by what Darius was saying. They looked back at him and the higher UPS, then to the pieces of paper in front of them. On it was a diagram of the core structure. As they read on it, listed what this new branch had jurisdiction over, the resources available to it from materials to buildings, and its responsibilities. Sorry if this plan is bare bones, said one of the officials. We thought it would be best if you two got to decide how the new branch would operate, seeing as you, Edward Elric, had experience in a branch of your own army which focused on alchemy. Yes, a state alchemist, as you called it. Darius, if you wanted to, you could structure it based on your Emerstrian model. Every part of Ed was screaming no. How could he? His mouth suddenly felt dry with an easy feeling roaming around his body at the thought of humanity's only government having a monopoly on alchemy and its uses. Dogs of the military, those words seemed to ring around his head. That's what we'd be helping to create. For some reason, that pocket watch in his jacket got a lot heavier. No, Ed said, also muttering it. No. We couldn't. He exclaimed. How do we know you or someone else won't use it to keep people in line or abuse it for personal gain? The army can't have this. Alchemy should be free to the people. I would ask you to reconsider. Darius replied calmly, if you fear an abuse of power then rest assured that won't happen. As I said before, you two would be the one in charge for the time being, helping to create it and appoint your subordinates and successors. You also promised to transition into a democracy. Edward reminded him, I don't even know if you plan on upholding that. That is an issue for another time, when humanity is not about to engage its greatest threat. Darius replied calmly. Still, even if we were on board with this, it would take years to build up something like this from the ground up, and our agreement was that we were done after we helped take back Wall Maria. Ed looked down slightly as he clenched his fist into a tight ball. I'm sorry, but no dia dash. Wait. Alphonse interjected, even if we did reject, this wouldn't be the end of it, would it? Ed turned his head to Alphonse. No, it wouldn't, Darius said frankly. If you two were to decline our offer, then we would propose this same offer to your trainees, Squad Leader Hang and Arlert. They would be the ones to build a new branch. Alphonse was silent for a few seconds. There was an audible gulp as Alphonse swallowed. His eyes drifted back from the paper to Darius to Ed. Al, what are you dash? We get to decide what happens to it. Alphonse clarified. We're willing to give you the freedom to shape the institution, mold it into what you want and shape its ethos. Darius elaborated, you even get to decide the emblem to represent it. If we wanted to teach people alchemy and let them use it outside of the army, then you'd let us? Alphonse asked. Perhaps, if you're asking to create two separate institutions, then that is a possibility. All that depends on how you'd use the resources made available to you two. Darius replied. We can't do th-. Can you give us some time to think about this? Alphonse asked quickly. When do you need an answer? We were hoping that you'd give us an answer now, seeing as the operation is closing in. Darius told him. How about after we retake Shiganshina? Alphonse suggested sternly. That way we could have a look at the situation at hand first before making a choice, and this whole deal does still hinge on the idea that we survive and win, so nothing will change until then. Ed continued to watch, stunned as Alphonse attempted to negotiate with Darius about it. Darius smiled as he scoffed slightly. We were aware of that, but if you insist until after the expedition, then fine, we shall wait. Darius replied. Now that's all we wanted to discuss. You two, please inform us of your decision to, and I hope you will continue to work with us. Ed got up from his seat. Hang on just a second, there's nothing to dash. Alphonse got up from his seat and tugged on Ed slightly as he motioned towards the door. Thank you, Premier. As Alphonse placed a clenched fist over his heart before almost pushing Ed out of the room. When the door had shut and both of them were standing outside the hallway, Ed grabbed Alphonse by the shoulder and forcibly turned Alphonse to face him. Alphonse, what the hell was that? Ed questioned. Why the hell did you want to hear them out on that? I didn't want to just pass up on something like this. Alphonse replied. I at least wanted time to think about it. Think about it? Think about what? How they'll use alchemists as their weapons, like what Bradley did. How they propose to make an army branch than anything else. Ed reminded him as he moved his hand of his shoulder. You know what alchemists who were recruited by the army were, dogs of the military, and what they did. We can't be responsible for something like that. We don't do it, then it'll go down to Hang and Armin. You think they won't be pressured into accepting this on worse terms than what we were offered? Alphonse argued. At least this way we get a say on how alchemy should be taught and used. If we want alchemy to be for the people, then we can make it for the people. And how long do you think that's gonna take? Not just teaching people, but making sure that we can trust them to keep it that way. Ed questioned. 5 years? 10. We have people waiting for us back home, remember, Winry. Last time she saw us we were just taken away in front of her, Grandma Rockwell, who must be wondering what happened to us. Ed squeezed the bridge of his nose with his fingers. Even the army back home must have interrogated them on what happened. Everyone must be worried sick about us. I know. Alphonse said, looking at the ground, his eyes drooping down. I thought we were on the same page. Our goal was to seal up the hole in Maria, then we leave. Ed said, if we have to tie up some loose ends, then fine, but we can't stay here for years. All that time we spent away from them before, we owe it to them to come home with everyone. And we owe it to walled humanity to help them survive. Alphonse replied. Chapter 47, This Moment. In other words, Aaron's father, Grisha Yeager, may very well have been a human from outside the walls. Irwin summarized to the group of officers, both the scout officers and the garrison officers inside the room. They all sat around a small wooden table with Irwin himself sitting at the head of the table. Yes, and he had possessed the power of the Titans much like the warriors Annie, Berthold, and Reiner. Hang added, but unlike those three he wanted to help us rather than push us to the brink. It would have been nice if he told us this before he got himself eaten by his kid. One of the scout officers commented. But considering everything we know now, it's possible Dr. Yeager even knew the truth about the ideology and the Rice family. He might have chosen to stay silent in fear of the government finding out about him. Hang observed, however, from Aaron's memory it's possible he was pushed to the edge because of the fall of Maria and committed the unthinkable. Hang turned her head towards Irwin. The resolve he needed to carry out what he had done must have been great. He had entrusted his memories to his then 10-year-old son about the secret he hid inside his basement before his death. What do you think is in there? Irwin stared blankly into the table in front of him as his mind wandered back to that classroom, a map of the walls covering the blackboard as his father taught about the history of walled humanity to a class. Something that he was forbidden to say. Hang added. No, Irwin replied, something that he couldn't say, even if he wanted to. The memories of this world, the memories which the first king erased from our minds, may be what is in that basement. But we will never know if we continue to sit here. Irwin looked up to his officers, a stern expression on his face matching his resolve. As of today we are ready. The operation to retake Wall Maria will take place 2 days from now. If we want to know what's in the basement, then let's go see. A soft smile quickly adorned his face. Isn't that why the scout regiment was formed? The rest of the room smiled at him, barring Levi, who sat on the edges of the group watching him. That will be all for now. You are all relieved. Should we tell those garrison officers about any of this? Asked one of the scout officers. No, for now this shouldn't concern the garrison contingent of the operation. Irwin replied, I'll brief them on the details of the operation later today. The late addition to the operation will hopefully be arriving today. Could we have some red meat today? Asked one of the officers. Not yet, we gotta wait for those garrison troops to all arrive first. Last thing we need is for those guys to be bitter about something like that. Replied another. What about Commander Shotties, didn't he withhold important information? Pointed out one of the officers as they left the room. Leave him. Hang replied, slightly annoyed, he's not worth our time. How cold, Hang, I remember you used to have quite the crush on him. Teased another. You shut up. Hang replied, half serious. As they walked out of the room, Levi trailing behind them. He turned around to face Irwin, with his head looking towards the ground. Huh. Hang muttered as the door was closed on them, leaving only Levi and Irwin in the room. A tense silence shrouded the room as the two face each other. What is it, Levi? Irwin asked. This might be impatient, but what do you plan on doing after we take back Wall Maria? Levi asked. I assume that coming up with a defense plan will come first, but after that. That is important, but assuming we are successful we would also need to prepare for a future in which the Elrics leave us. Irwin replied as he looked off away from Levi. Hopefully they'll stay long enough to finish development on new weaponry and upgrading our current arsenals. From there it'll be about eliminating threats, and the only way we can do that is by going after the basement dash. You realize I'm asking you because I don't think you're in any shape to join us? Levi questioned Irwin. I know that the rehabilitation phase of that metal arm is meant to be a bitch and a long one too. Ed told us as much, and those other guys know that all too well, but you act like you're fine and that you've gotten used to thing the moment you got it. Irwin looked down at his right arm, the dying sunlight gleaming off of the metal as the fingers clanked slightly from moving. That when I realized, you never did, am I right? And don't lie, I know you well enough now to know when you're bullshitting people. Irwin clenched his automail arm into a fist. It doesn't matter, I've been able to lead the regiment through the revolution, and now. Irwin countered, whatever discomfort I feel is irrelevant. Levi sighed. I knew it. Figures, you're a real stubborn piece of work. Let Hang lead the troops on the ground. I don't want to be looking after your ass on the battlefield. I'll tell the others that I complained until you gave in, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. Is that good with you? For a split second, Irwin contemplated it. Memories of his father quickly infected his mind. For a split second he thought about staying. No. Erwin replied confidently, and to Levi's stony dismay, I don't care what becomes of me. If I die, then the chain of command will fall to Hang, then Nanaba, and then someone else. I know this operation will be difficult, but it will be one of humanity's most critical moments, and I will give everything I can to it. This was my plan, and it is less likely to succeed if I'm not there. Maybe you're right, maybe the Beast Titan outsmarts us without you. Levi contemplated, but you said it yourself, we need to think about a time when those two smart brats are gone, and if you're not the person planning it, then humanity will be in the shit. All you need to do is use that head of yours, that's enough to beat the Titans. No, you're wrong. Erwin replied, I need to be there for this, I'm the one who organized this operation and dash. Stop. Levi interjected as he raised his arm up, if you give me some noble-sounding excuse, then I'll break your legs. He threatened softly, I'll do it so they'll be easy to put back together again and keep you here, but going to the bathroom will be a bitch for a while. Erwin shut his eyes softly as he began to laugh at Levi's remark. No, that just can't happen. He said, completely unfazed by the threat, maybe you're right, the whole point of getting the garrison troops on side was so soldiers like me wouldn't be used to fill empty gaps in the ranks, but... Erwin turned to face Levi, a look of determination on his face and steel in his voice, I have to be there, for the moment we learn the truth about humanity on this world. Levi leaned forward, is it that important to you? He asked, more than your legs? Yes. Erwin replied resolutely. More than humanity's victory? Levi questioned further. Yes. Levi remained silent for a few seconds. Fine. Levi replied as he turned towards the door. Levi turned his head slightly back to Erwin. Erwin. I trust your judgment. Levi said as he walked through the door and closed it. Ed looked outside the window of the carriage, his hand holding his head as his elbow rested on the window sill, as they rode through the main gate of Trost, horses and people moving past them as they slowly moved past the buildings of the district, the dying sunlight casting faded shadows. Ed shifted his eyes back to Alphonse, who was once again reading through the proposal given to them by Darius. Are you still thinking about that? Ed asked. We've not gonna do it. Ed sounded exhausted. He and Alphonse had spent the last few days traveling around doing different tasks and projects, and now had this bombshell placed on them. I told you, brother, I just want us to think about it. Alphonse replied. If there's anything more we can do to help them, then we should at least think about it. I'll still be worried about them after we head home too. Ed said solemnly. He turned his body towards Alphonse, but if we sink more and more time here just to make sure they're okay, then we'll be here forever. A powerful force they do not yet fully understand. Alphonse muttered. He looked up to Edward. What do you think the truth meant when he said that? Probably just the Titans. Ed replied, trying to sound confident. We don't know that much about the Titans, so I guess they're the force we don't fully understand. It sounded like a reasonable conclusion to reach, but even Ed knew that the truth was never that straightforward. When I was captured with Eren and Amir, she said that both us and Eren were in over our heads about our goals to beat the Titans, like we weren't looking at the bigger picture. But that's all she said. Alphonse said, what if there's something we're missing? We didn't catch on to what Father and the homunculi were up to until they were almost complete, or what our dad was up to until that day. What if it's the same here? Ed gripped his knees as he sighed heavily. Then I don't know what we'll do. Edward confessed, but until we know that for sure, our goal remains the same. We close the hole in Wall Maria and head home. The cart grounded to a halt as they arrived at a building. A long line of 3 steps led to double doors with a line of windows running along it. Ed opened the door, stepping out onto the step connected to the cart. Hey, he said as he turned his head towards the driver who was climbing out, this isn't the barracks. Mr. Reeves has arranged with your officers to stay here until the day you go out. The driver said, think of it as a thank you from the company. The driver approached Ed. I'll show you around. Ed looked back at Alphonse, who shrugged his shoulders. The driver pushed the double doors of the building. The inside was cozy but well kept, similar to the hotels that they used to stay in when they traveled around Ames Tries. Reeves' company workers stay here sometimes. The driver said, well, the bosses do on this side anyways, regular guys stay on the opposite side, that side probably look like your barracks. The driver pointed them towards the staircase rooms up here. he said, leading the two up the stairs. The corridor was lit up with the bright stones which were mined from the first king's cavern as a short line of wooden doors lined a corridor. Choose whatever room you like. Ed opened the first door to reveal a small room with a single bed with a small nightstand and an office desk pushed up against the wall next to the door. I'll leave you to it then. The driver said, cleaners come by every so often, but other than that the place is yours for next few days. He waved them off as he walked down the stairs. Ed looked back to Alphonse, who stood by the open door of a room near the other end of the corridor. I'll take this one, he said. Ed looked back to the first door. I'll take this one then, he muttered under his breath as he walked into the room, closing the door before falling into the bed and staring at the ceiling. In a brightly lit hall, rows of tables with people crammed into them chatted idly as servers from the Reeves Company placed plates of food on the table. The air was warm inside the hall and the smell of soup and meat filled the air. There were a couple of gasps and shocked faces as wooden trays filled with meat were placed on the table. Tonight may be a special night, but you can't let the civilians know that, said one of the scout officers. You're soldiers, so this isn't a party but a chance to relax a bit. Sasha, are you okay? Ed asked as he watched her eyeing up the tray of sliced meat with wide unblinking eyes. I'm fine. I'm fine, she replied, not breaking her gaze. It's not like I've hadn't gotten to eat meat for a while or anything. Yeah, so there's no reason for you to go crazy, Jean added almost sternly. Here's to recapturing Wall Maria, the scout officers said with his large cup in the air. Cheers. Not a second later did the hall erupt into a chaotic mess as everyone scrambled for the food. Sasha tried to grab the chunk of sliced meat with her hands like a starving animal when the tray was lifted up from the table by a small elevating platform. Not so fast, Ed yelled. Sasha tried to get out of her chair when Alphonse and Connie quickly held her to her seat. Potato girl, calm down will you? Jean demanded. Sasha. Alphonse yelled. Sasha, are you still in there? He said, clicking his fingers in front of her face. She quickly calmed down as she sat still in her seat. The platform which lifted the meat up slowly began to lower to the table until it settled down completely. Okay, Connie said as both he and Alphonse took their hands from her. Now let's just eat. Sasha quickly grabbed hold of the meat. Sasha, no. Please forgive me, Alphonse yelled before pinching the space between her neck and shoulder. Sasha dropped the meat onto the table sloppily as her body went limp and fell back to be caught by Connie. What did you do? Jean asked. Just something Ed and I learned from our teacher, Alphonse replied. I'll go look after her, Connie said as he began to lift her from her seat. I'll help you, Aaron said as he got up from his. Ed looked at the sloppy slices of meat lying on the table. He shrugged his shoulders as he picked up a piece and placed it on his plate. Everyone else followed along, enjoying themselves. Ed placed his hands together as he then picked up his empty wooden bowl, transforming it into a large pair of fake glasses. Hey, guess who I am? He said as he tried to show off his ponytail. Hang. Connie replied. Correct, Ed said, smiling. He transmuted the object once again to the shape of two large rectangles. He held them over his eyes. Who am I now? Is that meant to the commander? Mina giggled, sitting closely next to Alphonse. Commander Irwin's eyebrows aren't that big. Alphonse laughed slightly. Ed placed them back onto the table, ready to transmute the objects further when both Aaron and Jean burst up from their seats grabbing each other collars. What the hell? Ed exclaimed. You think you're so cool, jackass? Jean yelled. Well, what's with your long mane, Jean? Aaron shot back. Hey you guys, not the face, okay? Connie remarked as the two began to swing at each other. Someone should stop them. Alphonse was about to get up from his seat when Mina placed her hand on his shoulder. Anyone gonna stop them? Marlowe asked. They always did this back during the cadets, Mina commented as Aaron threw a soft punch into Jean's gut. It was more intense than this. Should we intervene or? Ed said, still watching the fight. It's fine, Mikasa replied calmly as she watched too. They'll be fine. The two began to heavily breathe from the exhaustion as they tried to continue the fight. Hey! Came a voice from their side. Not a second later did a forceful kick strike Aaron's stomach and onto the ground before Levi kneed Jean in the gut, chunks of meat and soup spilling from his mouth. "All of you go to bed," Levi ordered in his usual stony calm tone. "You've gotten too rowdy. And clean up this mess." "Yes, sir," said the ranks of troops in the hall. The crowd of troops quickly began to clean up, taking their plates and cleaning the mess of spills and crumbs. Ed turned his head towards the sound of violent tapping to see Sasha tied to a wooded pole with her mouth gagged. He rushed over to her and quickly untied her. She quickly leapt up to her feet. "Is there any left?" she asked with an urgency fit for life or death situations. Any meat left?" Ed asked. "Yeah, there's like a few slices around dash." Sasha quickly rushed off before he could finish his sentence. Ed looked around at a hall with less people than before. "Where's Alphonse?" he muttered to himself. "Must have gone off to bed now." He spotted Armin trying to carry Aaron off the ground. He quickly jogged over to them. "Hey, let me help you," he said as he pulled pull Aaron up as Mikasa watched. Ed and Armin carried Aaron towards the step of a nearby building along an empty street as Mikasa flicked her scarf over his other shoulder. They set him down onto the steps gently as they themselves sat down. "Why didn't anyone stop me?" Aaron asked them as he tried to resist the urge to realize his dinner from his stomach. "Were we supposed to?" Ed asked. "Al and I were told not to." "Why?" Aaron replied weakly. "We knew you could take it." Mikasa replied, "You can heal your body after all." "I can't believe you," Aaron remarked. Ed stood up, walked a bit and faced them with a hand on his back and one at his side. "You started it," Mikasa replied matter-of-factly. The group were silent for a while as they soaked in the quiet night. "Hey Ed, where's Alphonse?" Armin asked. "I don't know, I think he went back to our rooms," Ed replied. "You guys have your own rooms?" Aaron asked. "Lucky." "Yeah, Flegel let us have the higher-ups' rooms for his workers," Ed stated. "It's a thank you for the stuff we did for him." "Makes sense," Armin replied. "You guys feeling all right?" Ed asked. "You nervous for the operation?" "No. I don't feel nervous," Aaron replied. "I am a bit anxious," Armin stated. "Despite everything we learned and can do, we just don't know how it will all end." "We'll be fine, Armin," Mikasa reassured him. "What about you, Ed?" Aaron asked. "I'm not too worried," Ed replied. "Honestly, the Titans are a challenge, but I have a good feeling we can handle them." He sounded so sure of himself. "After we take back Wall Maria, are you and Alphonse heading straight home?" Armin asked. Ed was silent for a few seconds, his eyes wandered to the ground. "Not straight away," he replied. "Al and I have some loose ends to tie up first, probably have to go through more paperwork with the army. Flegel will want some last-minute help with some tech ideas, and then we have to say goodbye to everyone." Ed looked up back to them. "Not holding my breath, but I'm hoping Captain Levi throws some kind of leaving party for us." They chuckled at the thought. "Our priority will be to head home, that's the important thing." "Yeah, you're right," Aaron said. "There's no point getting caught up in all the small stuff. I used to envy you guys, you, Alphonse and even you Mikasa, for being so strong and knowing what to do, but I know now that we're only good when we have each other." "Couldn't agree more," said a familiar voice approaching them. They all turned their heads to the side to see Hans dressed in his long brown garrison jacket and uniform. "Captain Hans!" Aaron exclaimed, "What are you doing here?" "Guess you guys never heard, I'm coming with you," he told them with a small smile and soft voice. "We're all going back home. Together." "You're going with the garrison?" Armin asked. "But I thought Captain Ian was leading the garrison troops." "He is. I had a talk with Erwin and Ian about it, and we agreed that I'd take a demotion to be a part of the captain's battalion for the operation," Hans explained. "Commander Erwin asked you to join us?" Mikasa asked further. "He did, sent me this letter asking," Hans said as he reached into his pocket to take out a folded piece of paper. "I still remember that day, when we were run out of our home by the Titans." His voice became a lot more somber. "I told you kids I'd follow you into hell if I had to, but I think home is a lot better." He turned to face Ed next to him. "Hoping you help with most of the heavy lifting though," he joked. "Hey, that's what we're here for," Ed replied with a smile and playful tone. It was nice seeing you kids again, before the big mission. Hans said, turning his head back. Take care of yourselves and watch out for each other. I'll do my best make sure we win. Hans declared. The three saluted him as Ed nodded. Hans then walked off into the night. Hey, Ed said, catching their attention, when all this is done, what are you guys gonna do? He asked. I guess our work doesn't end after we retake Wall Maria. Aaron said, still have Titans to fight and maybe we'll find that hometown of the Shifters. We'll get to travel the world outside while we're at it. Armin said, his eyes lighting up like the bright moon against the dark sky. Think about it, that endless lake outside the walls, the lands of ice and endless sand, we'll finally be able to discover all of it. Armin stood up from the step as he spoke passionately about the world outside the walls. You sound pretty excited for that. I'm happy for you. Ed said, watching Armin with a smile. Shame we won't be there with you to see it, but I hope you remember Al and I when you guys are there. Alphonse sat at the desk of his room. The single candle illuminated the wooden surface as the light from the moon still flooded his room. There was a small stack of envelopes, each with a different name written on it, sitting just by his hand as he stared at a blank piece of paper with the words Dear Mina, written at the top. He tapped his pen on his desk as his eyes continued to stare blankly at it. Dear Mina. He muttered. He paused for a few seconds. Dear Mina. Thank you for. He stopped again. Dear Mina. There was a knock on his door. He turned his head towards it as he sat up on his chair. Must be Ed. The door's open. Alphonse said as he flipped the piece of paper over. The door opened as a person stepped into his room. Mina. He said, slightly surprised. Hey, what are you doing here? I just heard you guys were staying here now and I thought about talking to you a bit more. Mina replied, she said, her eyes moving from Alphonse to the floor a few times. She looked around his room. It's nice, must be nice having your own room for a little bit. Yeah, I guess some privacy is nice. Alphonse said, smiling. There was a long silence between the two as Alphonse tried to find something else to say. Are you nervous? He asked. Nervous for what? She blurted out quickly. The operation, Alphonse clarified, going to Shiganshina, we have to get up early tomorrow for it. He jokingly reminded her, of course none of them could forget. Right, no, I'm not nervous for it. Mina answered. At least I don't think so, might be a bit jittery but I wouldn't call it nerves. She seemed to fidget as she said that, I'm not nervous for the operation. You're okay? Alphonse asked. He began to fiddle around with the pen in his hand, impatiently waiting for something. Yeah. Mina replied, looking at the ground. She looked up at him warily. Alphonse, I want to tell you. She stuttered, fumbling on her words. It's okay, you can tell me anything. His hand twitched slightly forward as if to reach out to her. Stopping himself. I'm trying to tell you that. Mina tried desperately. She suddenly placed her hands on her face. What's wrong with me? She said through the palms of her hands. I put my life on the line. I can save you, I can kiss you, but I can't dash. You can't. Alphonse repeated. Even he was hesitant to say it. It's okay. It's not, if I can't do this, if I don't have the guts to do this, then can I really be the female Titan? She questioned. Don't say that. Alphonse said as he stood up from his seat and walked up to her. Why was it me? Mina said. She placed her head on his chest as he stood close to her. I'm not someone special, I shouldn't have become the female Titan, I shouldn't be here with you guys, I shouldn't have survived Trost. I shouldn't have gotten so close to you dash. Stop. Alphonse said as he gently placed his arms around her, resting his chin on her head as he pulled her in. You are someone special, you're special to your family, to your team, to your friends and to me. I feel lucky to have met you. Mina lifted her head up, Alphonse moved his head back, as the two looked at each other. Alphonse moved his head towards her slowly, stopping slightly as Mina lifted her head up a bit more to meet him. He softly pressed his lips against hers. She wrapped her arms around his neck as she pulled his head closer to her while Alphonse pulled her in further, their breathing frantic as they latched onto each other tightly as if afraid to let go. Alphonse broke off from her, the two still holding each other. The two looked at each other for a few seconds before he turned his head towards the open door. He looked back to her. Mina nodded her head. Alphonse stretched his leg out, his foot reaching the open door, before swinging her foot against the door, closing it shut. It was chilly. That was the first thought that Ed had when he stepped outside of the Reeves Company lodge, the cold air running through his nose harshly as if inhaled the dying afternoon breeze. He tugged on his cloak slightly as he tried to cover himself more. He turned his head back towards the door. Alphonse is not in his room, must have left earlier. Ed looked up to the sky, the orange rays of the sunset gleaming off of the wall and the buildings nearby, painting a silhouette before him. Ed began to walk towards the HQ, his boots tapping onto the quiet cobblestone road. As he walked past, he saw some of the laborers and workers pass by. "Good luck," said one as they nodded towards him. "We'll all praying for your success," said another. "Give those titans a damn good kicking," said a third. Ed smiled and thanked them as he walked by. As he passed by the barracks, he saw other soldiers, garrison, and scouts, all making their way towards the HQ. Some were already dressed with their ODM gear as they headed for the stables. Just outside the HQ, ODM gear was being handed to the soldiers waiting in a few lines along a row of tables arranged in alphabetical order. Ed walked towards the line labeled AF. He looked around, to his sides and behind him, checking if Alphonse was around. He got up to the end of the line. A staff member dressed in garrison uniform held a clipboard and a pen. "First and last name?" the person asked. "Edward Elric." "Edward, good to see you," they responded as they ticked him off the list. Another staff member behind them then began to hand Ed the scarabs and ODM gear as he quickly placed them onto the leather belts strapped around him. "Have you seen Alphonse?" he asked. "Yes, he came here maybe a couple minutes earlier. He should be at the stables, if not then he must already be with the others," they replied. Ed thanked them as he quickly headed off. He jogged along the road, groups of troops riding horses passing him by as they joined the rest of the column. "Ed," came a voice from among the crowds. He turned his head to see Alphonse standing by a lamppost holding the reins of two horses. He didn't notice it at first, but Alphonse was smiling at him. Ed smiled back as he jogged over to him. Alphonse reached out with the reins of Ed's horse when Ed pulled him in to hug him. "You got here early," Ed remarked as he pulled away. "Yeah, sorry I didn't wake you up too," Alphonse said. "It's fine," Edward said as he took the reins of his horse from Alphonse. "Come on, let's meet up with the others." A long column of horses, carts and wagons lined the main road to the gate. They walked their way through the mass of horses and people. "Oi," said a familiar voice close to them. They both turned their head to see Captain Levi on his horse. "Good to see you're slacking asses up," Levi remarked. "I was hoping to see you here earlier." "We're here now," Ed replied cheekily, "not like we're late." "No, but one of you is gonna have to haul their ass to the back of the column," Levi said. Ed looked a bit dumbstruck. "Erwin wants all points of the formation covered. Aaron and Mina are posted at the sides of the formation, so one of you either has to be at the front or the back." Ed sighed. Alphonse placed his hand on Ed's shoulder. "I'll head back," Alphonse volunteered. "All right then, I'll see you up top, Edward," Levi said as he rode away. Ed turned back to Alphonse and the two embraced once again. "This is it, Alphonse," Ed said as he pulled away, keeping his hand on Alphonse's shoulder. "All that work we did, it'll be over and we'll be back home in no time." "Yeah, we'll be home again," Alphonse said as he pulled the reins of his horse towards the direction of the back. "And we'll back everyone too," Ed added lightly, pointing at him. "And that too," Alphonse replied as he walked away with a thumb up. Ed climbed up onto the saddle of his horse as he rode it through the column. As he walked past, he noticed the looks the other soldiers gave him. Some patted him on the back, giving him words of encouragement. "We're gonna win. Titans don't stand a chance against you. You'll bring us to victory." Others, some glanced at him before looking away, not contempt but weary. Perhaps he never noticed it before. The endless praise and work had blinded him to animosity. Not everyone's expectations can be met. His horse stopped just behind the commander, who turned his head slightly to Ed. "Edward, good to see you." Next to him was Captain Ian and Levi. "Commander Irwin, you too," Ed replied. Ian turned his body slightly to look at Ed. The two nodded at each other as they caught each other's gaze. "Last expedition before you leave?" Levi said, shifting his head to the side. "If either of us don't make it, then let me say this, working with you and your brother was interesting. But I'm proud to have done so." Ed smiled slightly as he exhaled some air from his nose at the remark. "Thanks, Captain, it was interesting working with you too," he replied jokingly. "But don't start with the goodbyes just yet." There was a rumble of voices around them as a crowd of people began to form on the pavements and watch them from outside the windows of houses that lined the road leading to the massive gate. "Hey!" yelled a person from a rooftop window. They turned their heads to see Flegel. "Take back Wall Maria. The future of mankind is in your hands. Please come back home safely. Retake our land from the Titans." There was a massive cheer from the back. Ed turned his head slightly in the direction. The voices sounded a bit familiar. "Has the Scout Regiment ever gotten a send-off like this?" Ian asked Irwin. "No, this is a first." Irwin, he stared at the roaring crowds for a few sounds before he grabbed the handle of his ODM gear, shoved it into his scarab and pulled out a blade towards the sky. "Ray-ay-ay-ay-ay-ay-ay-ay!" Irwin cheered, a deep and passionate roar catching his subordinates off guard but fueled the crowd further. The large gate to the lands of Wall Maria rose from the ground. A rumbling of giant chains and a slab of rock mixed into the noise as the path to Shiganshina lay before them from a bright light at the end of the tunnel. "Commence the final operation to retake Wall Maria," Irwin declared, his voice booming over everyone else's. He whipped the reins of his horse charge. A long mass of horse, carts and wagons charged through the gate over a deafening wall of noise. Reiner sipped on the bitter coffee from his metal mug as he, Berthold, Porco and Zeke sat around a small fire on top of the entrance to Shiganshina which pushed back the darkness of the pre-dawn. Berthold sat hugging his legs as he held his metal mug as Porco sat relaxed as he listened to Zeke. "Like I told you, little Annie should be fine," Zeke told them in a calm tone. "Trust me, she's not being tortured." "What about what Edward Elric told me?" Berthold responded weakly. "He said that she was paying for her crimes." "Could you really see that happening?" Zeke questioned as if stating the obvious. "Consider our abilities, one cut and the scales tip in our favor almost instantly. That aside, this is Annie we're talking about, she can take care of herself." "But they know her identity," Reiner interjected. "We got lucky in our encounters against them, I don't think even Annie could dash." "Huh?" Zeke said interrupting them. "So you're saying not committed to the cause?" he questioned, his eyes narrowed as he looked at them. "I see. What exactly was that decision we made the other day?" Both Reiner and Berthold looked at him with apprehension, much to Porco's slight enjoyment. "I don't mind doing it again, Reiner. But if you lose next time, then you'll have to give your armor to a warrior more worthy of it." "That a good idea?" Porco commented. "Should do it anyways, we've got some time." "Shut up, Porco," Reiner said through his anxious state with a trembling voice as he tried his best to remain calm. "Make me, armored failure," Porco encouraged as he sat up slightly. "That's enough." Zeke stamped his authority on them. "We need to focus on the task at hand. The coordinate, we're here to capture Eren Yeager." "What about those alchemist brothers?" Porco said. "If what half of those two said about them is true, then they might be a bigger prize than the founding titan. Or a bigger threat," Zeke replied. "If their goals are tied to the devils, then there's no way in hell they'll surrender their abilities to us." He glared over to all three of them before focusing on Reiner and Berthold. "Beside what you told us about their alchemy, what can you tell us about them? The people behind the magic tricks." "They're smart," Reiner started. "Pretty sure everyone is smart compared to you," Porco remarked offhandedly. "They're intelligent," Reiner continued, ignoring Porco. "I've seen them help organize strategy during our attack on Trost. They were able to learn how to use ODM gear within 2 months when it took us over a year, and they're both crafty, more so the elder brother, Edward Elric," Reiner stated. "I've gone up against him, he managed to break through my armor which almost led to Eren Yeager killing me. If those two know how to break our armor, then what's the point of having them?" Berthold said as he tilted his head off to the side. It was dim and barely noticeable, but on the edge of the village which was grown out of the entrance to Shiganshina, a light could be seen through the window of a house. If the Elrics know how to break a Titan's armor, then wouldn't all our Titans be useless in a fight? Then we play to our strengths, while minimizing theirs. Zeke, we just have to use our ace in the cards more cleverly. Shame they won't stick around for the entire battle. Porco whined slightly. This is already a massive step out of their strict policy. Zeke stated, if the Elrics and Eren Yeager become a threat we couldn't handle, then we'll play our hand. Berthold asked, what do we do about them if we win? Capture them. As I said, their goals are tied to the fate of this island. Zeke stated. Kill them on sight. Zeke paused for a second. We have one goal, regain the coordinate and end this cursed history. In the distance Ed could see it, the long wall of Maria stretching out across the landscape for miles. He pulled down on his hood as the formation grew near. A green flare was shot nearby, trailing into the sky. Garrison, break. Came the order as dozens of horse, carts and wagons began to peel off from the formation on both sides. They drew closer to the wall and to the ruins of the town just outside the entrance to Shiganshina. The details of its desolation became clearer by the second. Squads Nanaba, Marlene, and Klaus, secure the town. Erwin ordered, his voice traveling for miles it seemed. The rest of you, onwards into Shiganshina. The formation quickly began to merge into a crammed line as they flooded into the town. Dozen more horses and their riders peeled off into the abandoned and broken streets and building corners of the ruins as the main column rode towards the gaping hole in Wall Maria. Begin the operation. All remaining squads, switch to vertical maneuvering. Ed pulled out the handles to his gear and aimed them for the top of the wall. His, alongside a web of other metal wires and hooks, struck the wall as it reeled him up. He climbed up onto the wall. Small plants and cracks littered this unattended and ancient stretch as he ran forward to the other side of the edge. Another district, a city enclosed within the half-oval of the 50-meter walls that surrounded it. Even from up upon the heavens it was clear the city was devastated. He continued his run to the stretch of wall that surrounded the district itself. Don't stop. Someone yelled behind him, get into position. He turned his head to see someone standing still and observing the district as others ran by them. Ed fired the cables of his ODM gear onto the walls as he swung his way towards the outer entrance of the district, tens of other hooded figures in front and behind him. Despite being surrounded by his allies and the lack of resistance both to and arriving to the district, he felt uneasy. 3 flares had gone off, green trails of smoke touching the clouds over the entrance into Shiganshina from the outside. Ed burst forward, the large hole in the wall seemingly staring at him. Despite the hissing of gas and small pings of metal hitting the wall, it was quiet. He landed onto the wall, a small team of scouts following him. He looked off to his side to see another small group just standing off the edge of the wall facing inside of the district. We're in position, whispered one of the scouts. Ed stood on the edge of the wall facing beyond the wall. Another scout peered over their shoulder as they counted down using the hand. 3, 2, 1. Jump. The 2 groups stepped off the edge of the wall and descended onto the ground, using the gas from their ODM gear to slow their fall. Ed landed onto the ground kneeling. He quickly shifted his head left and right as he watched his surroundings. He turned to face the hole in the wall, towering over him. Just like the one in Trost, he thought as he placed his blades back into the scarabs. Through the tunnel he could see the other team. And Alphonse facing him. Ed nodded at him as they both ran up to their side of the hole with their hands clasped together, sparks of blue electricity flickering around them. As they came to the open wound of the wall they planted their hands onto the ground as large grey rock walls began rose from the ground and shielded the tunnel, sealing the wall. Erwin watched, standing over the entrance into Shiganshina, as 2 green pillars of smoke climbed into the sky, its trail just in front of the outer gate of the district. A familiar zipping sound and clinking of metal hooks caught his attention. Erwin turned his head to see Nanaba and Gelger behind him. What's the situation? Erwin asked as he turned to face them. Garrison soldiers are now moving into the town as we speak. If the enemy does try to launch an attack from behind us then we'll be in a position. Nanaba informed him. Artillery cannons are being positioned and our horses are being grouped together as we speak. Good, the Elrics have succeeded on their end. Erwin replied. No sign of the enemy. Not that we could find. Gelger replied, whole place looked empty. What about in the district? Nothing. Erwin replied. Strange. Nanaba commented. Maybe they forfeited beforehand. Gelger joked. Commander! Yelled a person to their side. They all turned to see Armin rush towards them. I have something to report. Go on, Arlert. Erwin replied. I found a full set of camping equipment scattered on the ground. Armin explained, contents of the cups smelled like coffee, something that couldn't be found or made inside the walls, and there were traces of it from a metal pot along with 4 mugs. 4 mugs. Nanaba repeated, must be the armored, colossal, the beast titan, but another one. We got another shifter to deal with. Gelger muttered angrily. Was the metal pot cold? Erwin asked. Yes, Commander. Armin replied. Odd. Erwin remarked as he stared off into the territory of Wal Maria. What, it's just a pot. Gelger commented. Our speed reaching the district was at full pelt. They should have had possibly 2 minutes at most between when they saw us and when we arrived. Erwin explained, a fresh pot wouldn't have cooled off in 2 minutes, meaning they knew we were coming possibly 5 minutes beforehand and were able to prepare for our arrival. So we should assume they had scouts watching us. Armin asked, there are more enemies waiting for us. If that is the case, then our priority will be to locate our enemies. Erwin stated. Arlert, you've managed to devise strategies for us before, I'm asking you to do this now again. Arlert looked at him with wide eyes and mouth slight agape. Erwin waved forward more scouts, take as many men as you need. He turned to face the scouts approaching them, all squads continue your search under the command of Armin Arlert. Erwin watched as Armin began to brief the squad leaders on their next moves. Another big gamble? Commented one of the scout leaders. No, Armin's judgment is a safe bet. Erwin remarked. He is one of our greatest assets. Aaron and Mina's teams are in position on both sides of the district and it looks like the Elrics are heading back to us. Informed one of the scouts, what's our next move? Do we continue with the operation or put it on hold until we find our enemies? Erwin shut his eyes for a second as he exhaled through his nose. We must continue. He watched as the scout regiment began to comb through the houses of the district. To our own knowledge, we should have the advantage in terms of our manpower, weapons, and abilities to win any kind of battle. He explained, however, that being said, we have to assume our enemy is thinking the same way. Assault or siege, we just have to brace ourselves and hope we're ones with the better cards. Alphonse lands onto the wall, his boots sliding slightly as he came to a halt as a group of scouts following behind him. Commander Erwin stands on the edge of the wall, watching below along with other groups of scouts. Out of the corner of his eye, Alphonse spots another group of scouts landing on the opposite end of the commander. That must be Ed's team. Commander Erwin. Alphonse said as he ran up to them. He then saw Ed coming up from the side. Ed placed his finger on his mouth. There was a messy chorus of clanging on both sides of the wall. What's going on? Said one of the hooded scouts. It sounded like Connie. What's happening? Jean asked. Armin has a hunch. Erwin stated that they're hiding in the walls. Alphonse ran towards the edge and looked down, a row of scouts tapping their swords onto the wall. That's right, without the colossal titans the walls are hollow. Suddenly a flare was shot off from the inside wall of the district. Here! Yelled one of the scouts, there's a hollow point here. Alphonse turned his head to the direction of the smoke as others ran up the edge. A chip of the wall was quickly lifted, like someone on the other side of the wall was pushing outwards on it, and suddenly a blade stabbed the scout through their stomach, their hooks detaching as they fell to the ground. A person quickly crawled from the cracks. Reiner! Armin yelled. They're here! Yelled another scout. It must have happened in less than a second, because all of a sudden Reiner was out in the open and Levi falling towards them, his blade piercing Reiner's neck as they both free fell to the ground. Levi kicked Reiner in midair as he fired his cables onto the walls. Captain Levi! Armin yelled. Damn it! Levi yelled, his voice heavy in both anger and frustration. How the hell did he survive? I was so close, but I couldn't kill him. Reiner lay on the ground seemingly lifeless until his body was consumed in an explosion of light. illuminating the wall and the area around him. A mass cloud of smoke hid the ground below. As the smoke cleared, the 15-meter body of the armored titan lay before them motionless. "All units, check all around us," Erwin commanded, stretching out his arm. "Focus your attention within the district dash." Suddenly there was chain reactions of explosions just behind them, like a rapid chain of cannons shot each less than a second before the other. Alphonse and the others on the wall quickly turned towards the connecting town as they witnessed a line of explosions surround the town. A tall barrier of smoke encircled the town. As the clouds below lifted, a blockade of titans was revealed with the beast titan standing at the center of the siege. "It's him!" Gelger yelled. Even from up here, Alphonse could hear the yelling and shouts from the garrison below. Even if he was a small figure on the horizon, Alphonse could tell it was him. "The beast titan," he muttered. He noticed it, everyone else did too. There was something from the sky just falling towards them. It was a large boulder. "Incoming," Erwin warned. "Take cover." The boulder fell just short of the top of the wall, crashing into the entrance of Shiganshina. Boom! "He missed us," Nanaba exclaimed. "No, it hit their target, blocking our entrance," Erwin stated. "Cutting off our paths and forcing us into one spot. They want to wipe us out here. It's a similar strategy to Utgard Castle," Nanaba stated, anxiety and anger in her voice as she gripped the handles of her ODM tighter. "The armored titan is getting up," yelled Sasha, watching from the other side. "Looks like we've both getting the battle we're hoping for," Erwin proclaimed as he watched the beast titan. "Let's put an end to this here, humanity, or those damned titans." Chapter 48, Backs Against the Wall. The beast watched from a distance as the large dust clouds from the boulder he had thrown began to rise and vanish into the air. The titans that flanked him on either side stood diligently as they wobbled like tipsy patrons. He looked down slightly to see Pike placing another boulder before his feet. "Thank you, Pike," the beast titan spoke in its unnatural voice. He could see the ant-like dots zip around the large blank canvas that was Wall Maria. Zeke looked down at the boulder behind his feet. "Perhaps one more for good Luke dash." A distant succession of booms stopped him as his eyes perked upwards back to the city to see quick flashes of light. It sounded and looked all too familiar yet. Suddenly the titan next to him was hit by an explosion, tearing off half their body as their torso collapsed to the ground. The slope of the mound he stood on exploded as a mess of mud and dirt struck him. All around him a few larger titans had fallen to the ground in a cloud of smoke as their entire top halves were obliterated, and smaller titans were flung into the air from the explosive projectiles that struck them directly or nearby. The beast titan raised his arms defensively as the bombardment continued on them. He quickly moved his right arm off to the side to look back at the town as a shell struck his hand, the explosion decimating his entire forearm as he was knocked to the ground with a loud thud. "Ah!" the beast titan cried in anger. He looked at the smoking nub where his arm once was. "War Chief!" yelled the raspy voice of the cart titan as it crawled up to him. "Are you okay?" The beast titan began to get up to his feet, not once taking his eyes off the town. "I'm fine, just need to focus my attention to healing my arm. Damn, and it was my dominant hand too." He looked around his titan line. Empty patches now littered the line where a titan body filled. "Modern artillery couldn't have done this," he commented. "So these are the kind of results you get with alchemy." He inhaled deeply as he let out a loud roar. Suddenly behind him a few more bright explosions of light came off as more titans began to fill the empty ranks. "I was hoping to not use the extras just quite yet. I was hoping to save them for a later attack, but it seems they'll have to make an adjustment." "War Chief, should I call upon our help?" the cart titan suggested. "No, not just yet," the beast titan replied, "but I do have an idea." He looked down toward the cart titan. "Pike, leave Birdhold, and Porco here. I need you to scout around the town." "Yes, War Chief," the cart titan replied, reaching over to the wooden platform and placing the cargo onto the ground. "Now, let's kick things off," the beast titan remarked. He then curled his left hand into a fist and slammed it into the ground as it let out a vicious roar, commanding the first line of smaller titans to charge forward towards the village. Erwin watched as the front line of smaller titans charged towards the town. Another volley of artillery hit the titans, blowing the charging titans to chunks of meat and smoke along with the ground around them, leaving titan bodies and craters in its wake. Direct hit on the beast. Gelger cheered, his fist raised slightly. Eat it, you ugly bastard, try throwing rocks at us now. The Titans are still going to reach the town. Nanaba pointed out. Commander, the armored Titan. Sasha yelled, turning to him. It's climbing the walls. Erwin stood silently as he watched Titans laying siege to them. He focused his eyes on the beast Titan and the smoking stump on his right arm when his eyes drifted to a single Titan running on all fours around the formation. That Titan is carrying cargo on its back, he observed. They must have already taken form before the battle. Was this the one who spotted us? If that's so, he thought back to the information from Armin, 4 metal mugs. Then there are still 2 other shifters, the colossal Titan and another, we haven't found yet. The quadruped Titan is intelligent too. Erwin stated. We're up against more than the ones we know about. The enemy has more up their sleeve than we predicated. Garrison forces are now engaged with the advancing Titans. Informed one of the scouts, 2 and 3 meter Titans are into the town. Thank you, Corporal. Erwin replied in his calm and authoritative tone as the battle began to commence around them. It seems their strategy is similar to Utgard, going after our horses and cutting off our methods of escape. Erwin analyzed. However, they didn't seem to know we were carrying artillery with us this time, meaning their attempt to organize a prolonged siege or inflict heavy casualties is now difficult. Even if we lose our horses, we can fortify and bleed them out instead, of course. Erwin looked down into the town below, the garrison troops zipping around the outskirts of the town and around the invading Titans. That all depends on making sure our cannons are still being operational or our horses are still alive. Oi, Erwin, Levi said, catching attention. You gonna say something or should I go get breakfast? Squads Nanaba, Marlene, and Klaus reinforce the garrison soldiers below. Erwin ordered, his voice booming as he raised his blade upwards. Protect the horses and artillery positions. He inhaled deeply. Squads Levi, Dirk, and Hang, take down the armored Titan. He paused for less than a second. Squad leaders, use the thunder spears at your discretion, carry out the objective at all costs. He turned to face the group of squad leaders. This moment, this battle, will decide the fate of humanity, so once more, dedicate your hearts. Yes, sir. The other scouts yelled in imperfect unison as they jumped off the walls on either side. Levi squad, wait. Erwin called out, stopping them before they could all just into the district. Levi, Edward, and Armin, I need you to join with the garrison and scout units facing the beast Titan. He said, pointing his blade onto the town below him. Petra, you lead the Special Operations Unit. You and Heng will command our units in the battle within the district that includes both our Titan shifters. Neutralize the armored Titan quickly. We may require Mina's help if the other Titan decides to attack from the front. Yes, Commander. Petra replied, the confidence and resoluteness in her voice hiding its shakiness. Special Operations Unit, forward. She commanded as she jumped over the edge. Alphonse Ed called out to his brother, catching his attention. We'll get through this. Yeah, of course we will. Alphonse replied with an uneasy smile before he jumped off the edge just behind the others. Commander, shouldn't we have one of Aaron or Mina stick with us? Edward asked, facing the commander. For now I'd like to keep any shifter fighting contained within the district itself. Erwin replied, ordering either of the two to engage the beast Titan may tempt the other shifters to launch an all-out attack on the garrison's position, placing both our artillery and horses in jeopardy. Plus they're here to capture Aaron. We don't know too much about what else the enemy has, so being in the district at least shields them from that. Armin added. Indeed. Erwin replied, Edward, I need you to build a defensive barrier around the horses. He turned to Armin. Armin, the open space and range of your ability will be useful on this front. Support the artillery positions. You two will take orders from Ian under further notice. Yes, Commander. Armin replied as he jumped off the wall. Let's win this. Ed said with a slight nod to Erwin and Levi before following Armin. Levi, I'm tasking you killing the beast Titan. Erwin informed Levi, pointing his blade at the beast Titan. I trust you to destroy the beast. Understood, Levi replied, a low growl. I'll take the beast Titan's head. They're here. Jean called out as both Mina and Aaron landed onto the flat roof of a building. A green column of smoke hung over them. Lieutenant Petra, where's Captain Levi? Aaron asked. He looked around the group. Where's Armin and Ed? Commander Irwin ordered them to help the garrison forces against the Beast Titan. You'll be following mine and Hank's orders. The two shifters nodded their heads. Suddenly the other squads arrived at the scene. Both squad leaders Dirk and Hank approached them, Dirk pulling out a map of the district and laid it on the floor. Armored Titan is still climbing the wall, Dirk said, pointing at the entrance of Shiganshina as everyone huddled around. We have to assume his target is our horses. Meaning we have to force the Armored Titan to us. Moblet stated. Commander Irwin said we should lure the Armored Titan using both Eren and Mina. Petra informed them, catching their attention. That means we should use them as bait. Wouldn't that put them at risk? Mikasa pointed out. Use them as bait. Hang pondered, placing her hand on her chin. That could work, even if Reiner ends up going for the horses below, he'll still to contend with Ed and Armin, and that would free up both of Eren and Mina to either escape or ambush the Beast Titan. It'll confuse them. We still got to be careful of Berthold. Jean added, remember last time he got the better of us. Then we'll have to hope Reiner takes the bait and lure him inwards from the walls. Hank concluded, lifting his finger up from her chin. Alphonse, you stand back and offer support in the battle, try to remain hidden. Yes, squad leader. Alphonse replied. Let's get into position. Hank announced, the rest nodded. Petra turned to face Eren. Eren, move down the street and transform, we'll position ourselves here. Petra pointed towards an area on the map. She then turned to Mina. Mina, you're with us. When Eren lures him to this position, you'll be the first to attack from behind. Mina nodded. Your goal will be to distract him long enough for us to hit him with our spears. The rest of the teams then scrambled off the rooftop, zipping towards their position as their hooks latched onto the ruined buildings, pulling them forward. Lieutenant. Mina called out, catching Petra's attention. I'm willing to do whatever you ask of me, but I don't know if I can take on Reiner alone if I have to. Mina confessed, letting out a slight sigh. I wasn't in the top 10 like Eren, and I'm completely inexperienced. I understand. Petra reassured her, trying to calm her anxieties. You're right, maybe you don't have the experience or knowledge of either of those two, but you won't be fighting alone. Let's go. Let's go. Hans commanded as he yelled at the other garrison troops behind him, pulling at the reins of the horses as they dragged them towards the blocked entrance of Wall Maria. The shattered cries of explosions and people and the nearby destruction of houses rang through the air. Is that all of them? Ian asked, yelling above the noise. There are still some horses on the other side of the town. Hans yelled back. A house just a few streets away was suddenly torn to pieces as a Titan crashed through, scouts zipping around it. The Titan bobbled its head towards Hans and the others as it swayed its body towards them, jogging at them. Suddenly a fiery explosion struck the Titan from behind as it toppled to the ground. Mr. Hans. Came a voice from the rooftop. Hans looked up to see Armin go now. Hans and the others quickly tugged on the reins as they forcibly led them forwards. Edward. Ian yelled as he turned to face Ed, already kneeling down on the ground. Ed placed his hands together. Bright sparks of blue light flickered around him as he slammed his palms into the ground. A wall, in the shape of a half-oval, rose from the ground as the earth shook, shielding them from the battle raging on the other side. Armin zipped down next to Ed, the two exchanging nods. Good work, next task is fortifying our artillery positions. Ian briefed them. First wave of 2 and 3 meter class Titans pushed our operating crew further back, abandoning a few positions on the wider areas. Garrison and scout soldiers are doing what they can, but it's not enough, and if we want to hit the encirclement hard like we did initially, then we need to push forward. It'll be impossible to fortify the entire town. Armin pondered, but there are a few main roads which, if we block off, can limit their movement into it. There's the main road right ahead, 2 other larger ones on the left side of the town. Hans mentioned using his memory of the area. Other side of the town across the river is more sparse. Houses are built closely together, forming its own barrier. Armin added, we'll just have to have more troops to guard the side across the river. Sounds good, Ian replied. Armin, move to the other side of the river and support right flank until we can move troops to that side. Right, Armin replied. He grabbed the handles of his ODM gear and fired onto the wall, pulling away. Ed, we'll need you to cover those entrances for us, Ian instructed. Hans, you and your team cover Edward. Once that's done, try to consolidate the center. Consider it done. Ed replied as he grabbed the handles to his gear. Team, cover Edward. Hans commanded, kill any Titan that tries to look at him funny. Sir. Came a broken chant of several garrison troops. Ed. Ian called out, catching his attention before he could fire the cables onto the makeshift wall. I know you know this is big, everything hinges on us succeeding here. Ian seemed to remind him. Yeah, I know. Ed replied, as if stating the obvious. That's why I need you to agree with me here, no matter what, you focusing on making sure we win. Whatever it takes. Ian stated. Ed was silent for a second before turning his head away. I'll do what I can, don't you worry about that. Ed pointed the handle towards the small wall, fired his cable and pulled himself up with the other garrison troops. He stepped over to the other side. Behind his feet were small Titans crawling at the wall and running around the streets of the town like curious children chasing flies. The garrison and scout troops flying around them. Main road straight ahead. Hans pointed. Let's get moving. Ed said. He fired his cables onto a nearby house and pulled himself forward, Hans and his team following behind him. He skipped across the houses. Small Titans tried to grab at him with their meaty hands as the garrison troops behind him quickly cut them down before running after Ed. Ed leapt off of a house and towards the main road. A 3-meter Titan wandered into his path. He fired his cables onto the side of his temple and swung himself around to its back, his gas pushing him faster than the Titan could turn, as he slashed at its neck before landing gracefully onto the ground. He skidded onto the roof of a house, just a few more streets till the main road. Ed swiped his head from left to right, checking his surroundings, when he spotted 3 Titans clawing at the edges of a nearby building as 2 scouts tried to back away from them. Marlowe! He yelled. He felt his body suddenly shift towards their direction when someone grabbed his by his hood. Keep moving! Yelled the person behind him. With his eyes still trained on them, he saw a figure flash past the Titans as they collapsed onto the ground. The figure landed onto a nearby house. Go now! Levi yelled at them. Get the rest of the horses to cover. He looked ahead. In the far distance the Beast Titan stood before him with his blockade of Titan. Hans and his team quickly encircled Ed. Ed dropped his handles and slammed his hands together and placing them onto the ground. A tangled row of stone and rock thorns rose from the ground as it sealed off the entrance. All right! Hans yelled urgently. Onto the next! He said, pointing into its general direction. Armin snapped his fingers together. A burst of fire struck a 4-meter Titan from behind as it fell limp onto the ground. He scanned the area from the rooftop of one of the houses scattered across the other side of the river. Titans scrambled around the houses like lost children as the scouts and garrison troops flew around them, luring them to the edges of the town. Keep them away from the artillery positions. Midabi ordered as he stood up on the rooftop of a house. The sound of cables zipping around caught his attention as a single garrison troop flew around a 4-meter Titan. Armin pointed his hand towards it and pressed his fingers together. As his fingers skidded past each other, a blazing trail of fire struck the Titan in the eyes, blinding it as it clutched at its burning wounds, letting out a deep cry. The garrison troop swung around and put the Titan out of its misery. Alert! Yelled Midabi. Titans are concentrated at the south side of the town. Armin snapped his head to the side. A group of garrison soldiers were attached to a church tower as a group of possible 7 or 8 Titans clawed at it. He pointed his hand at them and pressed his thumb and index finger together. A burst of fire consumed the Titans at the base of the church, concentrating on controlling the path of the flames. The Titans were set alight. In their panic they moved from the church and began to wander around, crashing into nearby buildings. Kill those Titans! Midabi commanded, before they set the town on fire. A Titan began charging towards the house Armin watched from in its painful rampage. Armin stepped back slightly, his teeth gritted. Crap, no. He quickly pointed his hand at the Titan and quickly clicked his fingers. The Titan's head exploded, sending half of its head flying to the side. On the outskirts of the town, a few buildings were set ablaze from the chaos. Damn it! Armin muttered to himself, his eyes shifting quickly to survey the damage. I'm sorry, sir. No point apologizing, just gotta get on with it. Midabi replied. Rally the men and move them further in before the next wave comes in. Of course, through the flickering blaze Armin spotted it, a Titan. A Titan carrying a platform on its back as he crawled around on its hands and legs, watching them just outside of the edge of the town. Armin quickly pressed his finger and thumb together as he watched its movements, crawling very casually behind the dark smoke as it wandered off to the side. "Sir, I'm moving towards the side. I spotted some Titan movements that could threaten us," Armin informed Mitabi. "Be quick about it," Mitabi ordered before he fired off his hooks and swung away. Armin then fired off the hooks towards a nearby building to the south, aiming at and hanging off of the walls of the buildings as he approached the general direction of the Titan until he reached the furthest house the east. He climbed up onto the roof, lying down on the tiles trying to hide himself. He spotted the crawling Titan, carrying a wooden platform on his back, stay just a couple meters away from the outskirts of the town. Pulling out his telescope from his side, he peered through the lens for a better look. The Titan had a long horse-like head and face within a wide mouth which almost stretched from ear to ear, with black hair sat on top of its head. The Titan crawled on two arms and legs with a wooden platform lying against its back. Armin focused on the platform and noticed it carrying several rocks. "Rocks," Armin whispered to himself. His mind then slipped back to Utgard, the boulders raining down on them. He moved his scope down back towards the Titan's face, looking down onto the ground. Armin followed its gaze to see it digging a hole in the ground as it picked up a large rock just buried below the surface. Armin crouched up slightly and aimed his hand at the Titan, close to 20 meters. Armin whispered. He snapped his finger and thumb together. An explosive burst of fire struck just a meter away from the Titan, knocking them down as the platform spilled the rocks onto the floor. "Just off," he muttered, irritated. The Titan quickly got up. It shook its head from side to side looking for him. Armin did his best to stay low, slowly inching away down the tiled roof. Suddenly the rough sound of zipping cables snatched his attention as a lone garrison soldier landed near him. "Armin, Mitabi want dash." Armin quickly pulled the garrison troop down, before turning his head back to the Titan. Standing up back on its hands and legs and now looking in his direction. The Titan picked up a smaller piece of rock with its hand, pulling its arm back. Armin quickly stood back up, his hands ready, as he snapped his fingers together once more just as was about to throw the rock at them. A fiery blaze burst from his pointed finger and struck the Titan in the face as it tossed the rock at them. The rock crashed into the side of the building they stood on. The garrison troop grabbing Armin and quickly using their ODM gear to lightly crash into the ground as the house collapsed on itself. Armin collided into the grass. He pushed his body up, trying to ignore the pain, as he moved his head back. He spotted the Titan rushing away to the distance and back to the Titan line. "What was that?" the garrison troop asked, completely confused. "Another intelligent Titan," Armin replied as he got up to his feet, helping the garrison troop up too. "I saw it looking at us for a bit and then digging up from rocks. Looks like it was trying to gauge our defenses while getting some rocks for the beast Titan. Gotta tell the others about that," the troop suggested. "Yeah, we should," Armin agreed. The two began to run back to their posts. All the while Armin played back the moments before the Titans got away. "Who are you?" Reiner continued to chase after Eren as he sprinted further away from the walls and towards the center of the district. Eren weaved through the abandoned and ruined buildings, his Titan body moving more agile than Reiner's, who bumped into some of the houses, destroying them in his path. Eren entered into an open space. A large water fountain stood in the center, meters away from houses and buildings which encircled it. Eren turned around to face Reiner, walking around the fountain as the two eyed each other as they circled around waiting for the other to make a move. Eren began to raise his hands to his face. A familiar crackling sound filled the air and a crystal substance began to cover over his hands and fingers like brass knuckles. "How the hell did you get the serum for that?" Reiner muttered angrily. "Internally doesn't matter, I'll still beat you. Just have to do it quickly before." There was a bright flash of light behind him and a very familiar sound of thunder. Reiner quickly turned his Titan's body around to quickly see. A Titan fist collided into his face. Before his head to thrown back by the force of the punch, he saw the feminine figure of the Titan and long black hair covering its face as it swung its fist into his face. "Annie." Reiner crashed into a nearby building. As he pulled himself out of the wreckage, he turned to look at the Titan. "What the hell?" Reiner stumbled away from her. His Titan didn't show it, but his face was a picture of confusion which morphed into grief as he got a better look at the Titan. Its long black hair, the sickly pale gray skin and its silvery eyes just hid behind its raised fists covered in the crystal armor. Annie. I'm so sorry. Reiner clenched his fist as he watched the two titans approach him. He readied himself with a vicious roar. I won't let you death be in vain. Not you or Marcel. Reiner charged into Eren, pushing him onto the ground. Eren tumbled into a nearby house. He then quickly turned to the female titan. He swung his right fist at it. The titan dodged to the side and struck its fist into his front, shattering the armor but not piercing through it. Reiner jumped back slightly. He pushed the female titan back. Is that all you got? He walked towards her, swinging a heavy blow with his right hand. The female titan steps over the right and just dodges the attack, but Reiner hits with a jab from his left to his shoulder, pushing her back further as she stumbled on her feet. Reiner goes in further when he feels something grab his ankle. He quickly looks down to see a hand, a large stone hand from the ground grabbing at his ankle. His second of confusion bought the female titan enough time to land a punch with her right fist square in his forehead as she sends him stumbling back. There was a large blue flash of electricity behind her as the female titan reached down her ear and picked up a stone war hammer. The female titan picked up the hammer, raised it over her head and smashed it down onto Reiner's head. The hammer shattered into pieces as it crashed onto his crown but forced him onto the ground. Suddenly he was tackled to the ground by Eren, crashing further into the ruins of the district. They both quickly got up from the wreckage. The two stared at each other for a second before they both swung their fists at each other. Eren ducked his head to the left, Reiner's fist just grazing Eren's neck and shoulder as he delivered a counter-punch into Reiner's face, the crystal knuckles destroying the side of his face through his armor. The force of the punch sent Reiner crashing into the ground. As he rolled onto the ground, Eren let out his own roar. Reiner persevered, quickly rising to his feet. Eren threw a hard punch with his right hand. Reiner quickly blocked the shot with his left arm, pulling back his own hand for the punch. His hand grabbed it from the side before he could throw it. The female titan held a tight grip over Reiner's wrist as it swung a punch into the other side of Reiner's face, further shattering the armor around his face. Eren then struck him in the stomach and his ribs, large chunks of his armor shattering and falling to the ground. Damn it! Reiner felt a hand grip his neck, holding him in place, as Eren threw blow after blow to his face. I can't take two of them at the same time. The female titan then swept his right leg back and Eren swept the other as Eren forced him onto his knees. The two titans stomped onto his legs, holding them in place as they both held his arms apart. He struggled to break free but to no avail. He felt the female titan and Eren then twist his arms. He felt his titan's arms, its muscles and nerves being torn from his body till his arms was torn off and thrown to the side. Through the labored breathing and grunts of the titans, Reiner could make out the sounds of cables zipping around them. Break off! Came an order. Both Eren and the female titan. Two cloaked figures glided around him as the titans held him, turning around and heading directly towards him. Large metal rods sticking out of their arms. That's not. There was a flash of smoke followed by the metal rods shooting directly into his eyes, breaking through what remained of his armor. What? He only heard the scout troops burst away as a loud explosion, blinding him completely. No. One more round. Came a voice in the distance. Aim for the neck. I'm done for. Someone please, help me. Everybody get back. Someone yelled. Retreat. Yelled another, away from the armor titan. Eren, Mina, fall back. Came a command. Mina. You're the... Wait, what's happening? Colossal, run. The beast titan continued to watch as his titans continued to swarm the town which covered the entrance into the district. A few distant booms echoed through the air as the occasional shower of shattered artillery struck the titan line or the ground. Off in the distance he could see structures rising from the ground, so they're here. The beast titan muttered in its gravelly voice. Blocking the entrance, so you're digging in then. He looked down at his smoking snub. His forearm had grown back but his wrist and hand was still missing. There was a rush of footsteps to his side. The beast titan turned his head to see the cart titan rushing towards him, burn marks and injuries covering their skin. War Chief. Pike, what's happened? The beast titan asked. Enemy artillery targeting you. No, an enemy soldier was able to ambush me on the left side of the town. Pike informed, but War Chief, I didn't see any explosive or weapon in their hands, but whatever it was hit me like a flamethrower. Left side. The beast repeated. He looked back at the town. Then there are two of them here. I saw some alchemy being used in the center and the right side, and your attack only happened recently, yes? Correct. Pike replied. Then it's not just the artillery we have to tackle. Beast Titan stated. Strange though, neither Reiner nor Berthold told us about fire ability. How is the situation? Is anything going as you hoped? Pike inquired. Worse, the enemy is looking to dig in and appears to be spreading themselves across the town. The Beast Titan informed. Even if my hand wasn't blown off, I wouldn't be able to hit the bulk of their forces, seeing as they're avoiding the outskirts. And even if I did, they'd still be able to retaliate with their artillery before I could hit them with a second strike. How should we tackle this, War Chief? Pike asked. Locate their artillery positions and destroy them, or at least as many as we can. The beast stated simply. There's ranged weaponry and those alchemists are making light work of Titans. Taking them out would make things a lot easier. Failing that, I'll need a distraction instead. Should we send Porco or Berthold in? Pike suggested. No, let's not change our plans on one front just because isn't going to plan just yet. The beast, we still have our ace which might more suited to the situation. Suddenly a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. Thunder then struck inside the district. A third flash of lightning. Pike observed. Has one of Reiner or Eren Yeager needed to change their Titans already? The beast looked up at the sky. They couldn't have, oh Annie. Or, they have possession of the female Titan. The beast stated. He looked at the ground and the two barrels next to him along with the other cargo. Berthold, you're up. Shouldn't we wait for Reiner's signal? Pike asked. There won't be a signal. The beast replied. They'll kill him before he can do anything. The beast picked up the barrel with his left hand. Sorry about my aim, Berthold, it's been a while since I used my left hand. Let's hope I'm not too off. He pulled his left arm back and with as much force as he could muster in his left arm, tossed it into the air and to the district. Everyone take cover. Hang yelled, abandon the armored Titan. Hang fired her hooks onto Mina. Run. A number of her squad and Dirks did the same as they either latched onto Mina or Eren, who began sprinting away from the incoming dot in the sky. Spread out. Petra ordered, waving her thunder spear. She fired off her hooks, clinging to the nearby building as swung away following her squad. In his panic, Alphonse frantically grabbed at his handles, fired them off in the general direction where Eren and the rest of his squad were going. He reeled himself forward, pushing the gas, as he liked the others burst in all directions. He hopped across the houses, other scouts moving either ahead, to the side or just behind him like a rat race. As he looked back he could just make out the armored Titan now in the distance. The distance echo of its loud roar filled the air as it fell over to the group limp. He looked up to the sky. The dot in front of the clouds was a bit closer. It was now a barrel in front of the backdrop of the district wall. As he jumped off the ledge of the house he stepped on, still watching, the barrel in the sky quickly burst in a small ball of light which grew to enormity in the blink of an eye as the buildings around it were pushed back and ripped off the ground and into the air. A godly powerful wind quickly spread from the epicenter of as it destroyed everything in its wake. Alphonse looked down, a cellar door at the bottom. Alphonse dropped down to the ground. Down here. He yelled, grabbing the attention of some of the scouts. A small group of scouts followed him. Among them was he recognized Nifa from Hank's squad. Alphonse smashed his hands together and slammed them onto the doors of the cellar, the wooden doors shattering into pieces. In here, hurry. The group of scouts from different squads rushed down the stairs into the dark cellar, the only light coming from the open entrance. As Alphonse entered and fell to the cellar floor he looked back at the open entrance above. He could see the top half of the houses opposite being torn off by the wind. Get down, yelled Nifa as they crouched onto the floor, some covering their heads with their hands. A random scout grabbed Alphonse and pulled him further in. The ground behind them began to rumble and shake violently as the sound of the house above them came crashing down over the entrance, closing them in darkness. Chapter 49, Two Fronts. Nanaba slices through the nape of the 4-meter Titan as it collapses onto the ground. Next to it she spots the half-eaten remains of some poor scout or garrison troop. Damn it! She muttered from her vantage point on a house's chimney. She looked up to see her squad cutting down the remnants of the first wave as the garrison teams begin to retake the artillery positions, quickly moving the metal shells and placing one in the cannon. In the distance she spots the Beast Titan watching them, squatting down flanked by his half-ring of 15-meter Titans. She gripped the handles of her ODM gear just a bit tighter. "You'll pay for what you did." Nanaba. Came a voice behind her. She turned her head to Gelger behind her. "Looks like we've almost got this place locked down." He commented, "You should regroup with the others." "Right, tell the others to maintain their positions and cover Rico's men." Nanaba ordered, "And keep moving around, we can't let the beast see us concentrated in one spot, you remember last time?" "Yeah." Gelger responded. He fired off his cables and zipped away. Nanaba fired her hooks to a nearby building as she hopped back to the small wall that shielded the horses. As she reached the barrier she flew over it and landed inside. A mass of horses were tied to the hastily nailed posts as the wounded were quickly ferried inside and soldiers refueling their gas quickly jumped over and back into the fray. She spotted the others' officers along with Ed and Armin huddled together as they surrounded a table. She rushed over to them. "Squad leader Nanaba, glad to see you're alright, what's the situation?" Ian asked, looking up from the map. A rushed half-ring of pebbles surrounded the map town as X's marked the positions of artillery crew. "My squad have been able to retake the positions we previously had to fall back from." She then turned to Rico. "Your teams are now operating the cannons once more." "Thank you, squad leader." Rico replied. They both turned back to the others. "Where's Captain Levi?" Nanaba asked. "He's still ordering the others." Ed replied. "He said he wanted to keep an eye on things." Nanaba nodded. "We still have to think about taking out the Beast Titan. We can't stay like this forever. The causality numbers keep rising and we have no idea how many of their own forces they have to their disposal." Rico stated. "Rico's right." Klaus replied. "We should move more artillery pieces to the front and focus fire on the beast. Knock the bastard out and end this." "No." Nanaba interjected aggressively. "That's what it'll want. If we group our forces in one location then it'll aim its shots there. By the time we'd had moved enough of our cannons to the center they'll notice and it'll be too late. If we stay in our current positions the Beast Titan will pick them off anyways." Mitabi argued. "I have to argue in favor of Nanaba." Armin interjected. "From our experience at Utgard, the Beast Titan initially weakened and tested our defenses with the first wave. The second attack was entirely focused on one side, putting what remained of the 104th on one side played in the Beast Titan's advantage even if it did make sense for us in the moment." "Exactly." Nanaba responded. She placed her hands on the table and leaned in slightly. "Ian, I've been under siege by that Titan before and it wants us to play the obvious move. If the Beast Titan is smart enough to set strategic traps for us then it'll find a way to deal with our current strategy." Marlene stated. "That's true, but from past experience, our current strategy isn't falling into the same traps he laid in the previous attack." Nanaba stated. "If we have to attack the Beast Titan then I recommend we should do it from a position of strength." A sudden series of booms caught their attention as they snapped their heads back to the wall, dust falling off it. "Beast Titans throwing rocks at us," Ian said. Very quickly a fast chain of explosive bangs followed nearby. "Right now we're making it difficult for it to do anything, throw rocks or overwhelm us with Titans," Nanaba added. Suddenly the ground underneath them shook violently, the pebbles on the table jumped and fell off as everyone else either stumbled or tripped over to the ground. The horses tied to the posts and rails began to panic as a deafening explosion choked the sound of everything around them. "What the hell was that?" Ed exclaimed as he regained his balance. He turned around and picked up Armin from the ground. "That came from inside the district," Rico stated as she turned towards the blocked entrance into Shiganshina, a mass of smoke blocking the view into the district. "The colossal Titan," muttered Klaus. "It's inside the district," Marlene added. "Alphonse!" Ed yelled out. He placed his hands on his head and he looked into the gap of the blocked entrance. "Aaron! Mikasa, oh god!" He reached over to the handles by his side as he almost ran off. "Stop!" Ian grabbed him by the shoulder. "You're needed here." "Needed here?" Ed questioned. "The colossal Titan probably just wiped out the others. My brother and my friends could be in trouble or worst. I've gotta be there. Commander Irwin told you to follow Captain Ian's orders. Rico reminded him, you have your orders. You think I'd care about that right now? Ed threw back almost confused, he shrugged Ian's hand off. Wait. A voice demanded behind them. Levi landed onto the ground and walked towards them. Irwin told you, Armin and I to stay here and take on the Beast Titan. Captain, my brother, Petra, our friends are in danger. Ed argued. You don't trust your brother? Levi questioned, you think he's not capable of surviving, after everything we've been through? Of course I do, but I can't ignore this. You gonna tell me just to get on with it? Ed questioned, aren't you scared or worried about them? Armin. Levi called out, you worried about your friends? Armin didn't answer at first. Yes. Captain. He replied hesitantly. Me too. Levi stated, and are you going to break rank just because of that? Levi inquired further. No, Captain. Armin replied. Same here. Levi agreed. He looked back at Ed, I get it, how could I not, but we just have to put faith in them and carry on. The violent rumbling died down, the sound of the house above them collapsing turned silent, however in the distance the sound of a deep and low thud echoed through the cellar followed by low rumbles. Lights, we can't anything in here. A scout said, the sound of footsteps echoed loudly as they searched for candles or a lantern. Hold on. Nifa said, there was a sound of rustling as a shining stone suddenly appeared, illuminating Nifa as it pushed back the darkness to the edges of the room. Alphonse, could you break this into smaller pieces? Alphonse approached the Nifa, she handed him the crystal. Alphonse placed his palms together, and the crystal between them, as it broke off into 3 smaller pieces. Alphonse handed one to Nifa and other to a different scout. How many of us are here? Nifa asked. The group huddled closer as Nifa counted them, whispering the numbers 7. She spoke out loud. No one's injured? She asked. A small choirs of no's followed. Good, let's find a way out of here, hopefully the others have made it too. Alphonse, carrying a shining stone in his hand, began to wander around the cellar, looking for the caved-in entrance. He could make out the faint outline of a wall in front of him as he stepped closer. Before he turned away he felt something crunch underneath his boot. He looked down to small stained cream rocks underneath them. There was a sickening feeling in his stomach as he spotted more of them, long, slender, stained and decayed. Bones. Oh no. He pointed the shining stone, following the trail of bones till he saw old and worn clothes covering it. As he followed the bones he saw the head of the skeleton, an adult, lying on the ground. And smaller bones wrapped in a bundle next to it. Alphonse covered his mouth as he stared at it, his breathing slow but static, as a sickly feeling came to creep over him. Alphonse. Nifa said. He felt a hand grab his shoulder. He turned his head away from the bones and to her. Horrible. She commented in her sigh. They were trapped down here, when the Titans came. Alphonse muttered weakly. He shut his eyes softly as he clenched his hand. We can't let something like this happen again. His last words spoken with the resolve he began to feel. No one should have to go through this. No one should have to die like this. Nifa. Called out one of the scouts, I found the entrance but it looks like the wall of the house came down on it. Alphonse. Nifa said. Alphonse walked over to the stairs. The wall of the building had completely fallen over the cellar entrance. Alphonse placed the stone down on the step as he brought his hands together, placing them on the fallen wooden wall. Flashes of blue light gleamed off him as a massive hole was blown through the wall, pieces of wall scattering off to the side as a burst of light flooded the bottom of the basement. They all covered their eyes as it adjusted to the light. Alphonse lowered his hands slowly from his face as he turned his eyes back to the sky and the surface. As he looked to the sky he noticed it very quickly. There was no sky. Above him was smoke, thick gray smoke, shielding his view of the sky, and on the surface was fire. Everything's on fire. Alphonse took in a short intake of breath and began to cough violently. He went a few steps down the stairs and back to the others. What's happened? Nifa asked. Fire. Alphonse coughed. Everything's on fire. We were not that far from the center of it. A scout commented. A lot of the houses near it must have been completely torched. It's almost suffocating being up there. Alphonse said as he caught his breath. He then unhooked his cape. We should probably take masks if we're gonna move around. He dropped his cape on the floor, placing his hands together and onto the cape, breaking it into long pieces of cloth. Everyone gathered around and picked up a piece of cloth, wrapping it around their mouths. Ready? Nifa asked. Yes, some said as the others nodded. All right, let's move. Nifa said, leading the way. Let's try and find the others. They walked up the steps and onto the surface. The air was heavy, black specks and flakes drifted in the air as the heat of the flames pressed against them as the sound of rock and scorched wood was knocked away or crunching under their feet. Stay close. Nifa yelled. Underneath them the ground continues to rumble every couple of seconds as the sound of crashing and crackling fire. We need to get out of this smoke, yelled one of the scouts. Just keep moving, Nifa yelled. The air around them began to get a bit lighter and the smoke thinner until it was clear. They rushed out of the smoke gasping for air. We're out, thank God, commented one of the scouts. Alphonse pulled the mask off his face as he took deep breaths of clear air. Come on, we still have to find the others, Nifa said, rallying them. She took out the handles of her ODM gear and fired her hooks onto a nearby intact building. The others followed her as they ascended from the ground. Alphonse's eyes immediately went to the colossal titan, standing gargantuan among the burning field of houses. He had only half of it back in their battle at Stohes, but standing here, it truly did live up to its name. The skinless titan which looked as though it could reach up into the sky like Father did, trying to reach the truth. Dear God, muttered one of the scouts watching. We don't have time to watch. Nifa reminded them, keep an eye out for the others. They quickly began to zip away, jumping house to house. Nifa, should we fire a flare? Said one of the scouts. We might as well try. Nifa replied, hopefully any survivors will see it through the smoke. One of the scouts took out their gun as they loaded a red flare into the chamber before pointing it up to the guy. A loud bang went off as a trail of red smoke reached above the clouds. Not a few seconds later did another red trail of smoke ascend from the rooftops of a street in a couple streets away before a third went just a couple more streets away from the last. That must be them, cheered one of the scouts. Thank God, remarked another. Come on, let's move, Nifa ordered with a smile on her face. They all quickly flew towards the center. In sight was a large black-haired titan carrying a few others. Aaron, Alphonse called out. Alphonse, Jean called out, waving at him and the others. Alphonse quickly spotted the others, the rest of his squad all hanging off of Aaron. Just past them the sight of another titan jogging towards them, its head down slightly just at roof level, approached them. Mina. Hang. Petra called out. Mina carried with her other scouts while some circled around her, before stopping just before them, kneeling down before one of the houses. You guys survived, Connie exclaimed, shocked but clearly relieved. We thought we were the only ones. Sasha almost cried. Nifa, you lived. Hang yelled out happily. Hang, Moblet, Nifa called as she reunited with her squad. Alphonse looked at Mina, who turned her head to him. He only smiled as he nodded his head to her. Thank God. Let's take a quick head count, Hang called. They huddled in closer as Hang began to count them. There was a glum look on her face as she went over the tally. Looks like about half those in the district survived the colossal's appearance. What do we do now? Jean asked. We take down the colossal titan, Petra declared. The beast titan sat down on the ground, watching his smaller titans attempt to break through the barriers and get cut down ruthlessly by the irritating flying humans, or his line of titans getting picked apart by the artillery. He looked at his legs. Now his left foot was a smoking stub along with his left arm and was lying something far away from him. Guess I should consider myself lucky they didn't hit my head, the beast contemplated. He looks back at his right hand, just a wrist and half a palm. War Chief. A raspy loud voice yelled to his side. The beast turned its head to see the cart titan once again run up to it. Looks like they got me again, the beast commented almost jokingly. I should be thankful they're focused on killing my titans first before me. He looked back at the town still. Can't say I'm not frustrated about how this situation is going. Perhaps we should deploy Porco and have him wreak havoc on the enemy's lines. The beast suggested as he looked down at the barrel behind him. I'd much rather have him mop up the enemy forces or catch any runners. War Chief, how many smaller titans do we have left? Pike asked. Less than half a wave left. The beast replied. Send the entire force onto the left side, just across that river. Pike suggested, I've scouted their defenses further and that side seems to be the most sparsely fortified. Is that so? The beast titan commented. If we can overwhelm their left flank, even just push them out of the other side of the river, then we've narrowed their area of operations by close to half. Pike advised. A brilliant idea as ever, Pike. The beast titan complimented. We'll still have to neutralize or distract the other artillery pieces, however this is where our friend may come into play. The beast suggested. Not Porco? Pike asked. No, let's not reveal all our cards just yet, but it is time for a strategic substitution, wouldn't you agree? Perhaps a new batter. It joked, a toothy smile on its face. A baseball joke? Pike asked. The card titan rolled its eyes. You all should really join me playing catch sometimes. The beast commented. Now, inform our friend that it's time and be sure to brief them on the situation. Of course, War Chief. Pike replied. The cart titan's head then ticked up slightly to the sky, its eyes narrowing slightly. A few red flares, a signal perhaps. The beast titan tilted his head up and noticed the 3 red trails of smoke stretching into the sky. Perhaps I'll need to send Porco in sooner than later. The armored titan sits up, the pieces of debris and rubble, sliding off his body or pushed to the side. The back of its neck explodes into a large cloud of smoke as Reiner emerged from its nape. Reiner pulls the nerves attached just below his eyes with a wet snap. He climbed over to the armored titan's shoulder, looking around him. The fires around him looked to now be dying down, revealing the utter destruction Berthold had unfolded onto the district. The colossal titan towered over what was left around it as marched towards the district entrance into Maria, smoke emanating from its skinless body. The air was heavy and thick from the smoke, yet Reiner took in a deep breath. Berthold. He muttered as he stared at the colossal titan. I failed Annie. His mind went back to the female titan. I'll have to apologize to her father, but I won't tell your father about your death too. I'll bring you back home to him. He climbed down the body of the decaying armored titan, jumping onto the ground. He looked around, surveying his surroundings. Before Berthold could transform, they scattered off. He thought to himself, whatever's left of them will try to launch a counter-attack. He waded through the rubble as he wandered around. Whatever they're gonna do, I've got to stop them or at least mess it up somehow. Still, his mind wandered back to both Eren and Mina, not with a sense of regret but curiosity and the memory of their new weapons. The long spear-shaped weapons which they blasted into his eyes. Whatever those weapons were, it broke through my armor, damn near could have killed me if Berthold hadn't shown up. He climbed over a fallen stone wall. I'll have to be careful, can't ignore the others if I'm going into a fight against those two. He crouched down and slowly moved through a broken roof of a toppled house. I can't take those two alone. His mood turned bitter slightly. I guess I'll have to call in Porco here too. Suddenly there was a distant bang. Reiner looked up through a hole in the roof to see a trail of red smoke. He crawled out and stood up into the open. 2 more red trails decorated the sky as a very distant sound of zipping cables passed through the low rumbling of the colossal titan. Armin snapped his fingers together. A burst of fire struck the nape of a 5-meter titan, crashing into the destroyed rubble of the building. The garrison and scout troops continued to mop up the remnants of the titan wave. His eyes scanned the area around him, Midabi's side of the battlefield. He quickly noticed that the scattered buildings that they used to anchor themselves was becoming fewer and fewer. This side of the town is structurally becoming weaker, Armin observed. Even if we reinforce this area with more troops, we're at risk of becoming overrun in the next wave. He watched as a scout cut down a lone titan. I wouldn't want to divert Ed's attention from the center, so I'll have to make the defenses myself. We'll just have to make it past this wave. Arlert! Called out one of the troops, grabbing his attention. Midabi wants to see you. Armin pulled out the handles of his gear as he fired the cables and began to jump and glide towards the other officers. Just near the river, the remaining buildings were clumped around, keeping their artillery pieces hidden. Alert! Mitabi called out, surrounded by other garrison officers. Lieutenant. Armin replied. Have the remaining Titans been eliminated? He asked. Still a few ones left wandering around, but it's safe to say the wave has passed. Armin replied. Good, we could use the opportunity to regroup. Mitabi stated. Lieutenant, if I may, I don't think we're strong enough to handle another wave. Armin observed, we've been losing buildings on the outer side, enough that our artillery is under threat of exposure. He thought back to the Titan, lurking around collecting stones and watching them. Does it know? I'll need to rebuild some of our physical barriers if we need to hold out any further. Armin informed them. We can have the men cover you then. One of the officers suggested. We'll have to act quickly, we don't know if our enemies might have figured it out too. Armin told them. Just a second later, a flurry of gunshots interrupted them. They looked up to the sky to see 7 red flares just to the side of the town. There was a low rumble shaking the ground and ringing in the air, followed by an avalanche of yelling and cries. A garrison troop quickly landed onto the house near them. Run, we're been overrun. They yelled. Sudden a Titan crashed into the house the garrison troop was standing on and grabbed them, slamming them into the roof. Move now. Mitabi ordered, straining his voice. They all grasped and fumbled for the handles of their ODM gear. Armin fired his hooks onto a nearby house and reeled forward as a Titan crashed through the house where the officers stood, crushing some and then grabbing Mitabi before he could escape. More Titans began to crashing forward, swarming their position. Mitabi. Armin yelled. He pointed his fingers at the Titan grabbing him. No. Mitabi yelled, run, alert the others. Go alert. The Titan which gripped Mitabi then chomped him in half with his large teeth. Armin could only watch in horror at the sight. He turned his gaze upwards to the horde of Titans as scouts and garrison soldiers fled around in a vain effort to stem the tide. Fall back. Came an order. Everyone to the river. Armin yelled. He pointed his fingers at a horde of Titans and snapped them. He didn't try to focus on a path, anywhere would do, as a large explosion burst into the center and knocked down a group of Titans. Go now. He watched as what remained of the eastern side's coalition of soldiers began their retreat. Before he began his, he stared at the Titan horde for a few more seconds, spotting the crawling Titan lurking once more on the edges of the ruins of the town. They knew. He swung away towards the river, cursing himself for not noticing their weakness first and now destroying that intelligent Titan when he had the chance. He watched as they hopped over the river to be greeted by other soldiers waving them in as artillery pieces were set on the edge. Move. 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 Commanded one of the garrison troops on the other side. Armin zoomed over the river and rolled onto the other side. Armin. A voice called out. He looked up to see Ed running towards him. He grabbed Armin's arm as he helped him up. What the hell happened? Focused attack. They overwhelmed us. Armin tried to explain quickly. Ed, you need to fortify the other side. Titan horde is coming down on us. Ed quickly let go of Armin as he ran over to the side of the river. He planted his hands onto the ground as an array of large pikes sprung from the ground just as the Titan horde came charging in. They impaled themselves onto the spikes as they tried to cross the river. A barrage of shots were fired onto the horde. The shells tore them apart as chunks of Titans were thrown into the air with the smoke. Armin fired along with them, burning any of the Titans which tried to break through. A pile of smoking Titan corpses littered the other side of the river and within it, clogging the flow. A bellowing roar suddenly echoed across the region as the Titan wave came to a halt, falling back into the rubble as they stayed there. In place, guarding the other and watching them. What happened? Demanded hands running in as more garrison troops converged onto their position, staring at the other side of the river as hands. Armin said breathlessly, exhausted by the ordeal as the adrenaline began to wear off. Mitabi's dead, we just lost our entire left flank. Nanabal looked through the telescope as she watched a 15-meter Titans fill in the gaps of the ring which still surrounded them. He circled around the ring, quickly noticing the small gaps in their line, individual spaces now left. They're running out of Titans. Nanaba noted, handing the telescope to Gelger, who quickly looked through the telescope. Thank God, here I was thinking their numbers were limitless. Gelger commented, still hard to figure out who's winning at this point, us or them. If they hadn't overwhelmed us on the left then, I'd say us. Nanaba replied. But if everything until now was just at gauging our defenses, then we don't know if they're miles ahead of us. Yeah, we have to stay on our toes, can't get complacent. Gelger, come on, enough scouting, meet with them others and find out our next moves. I'll hold down this area. Be careful, Gelger. Nanaba told him. I know what I'm doing. Gelger remarked with a smug smile. Nanaba sighed softly before gliding away back towards the command center and over the small wall. She noticed the other officers huddled around the open table as they listened to Armin. As Nanaba approached, she spotted the map. A mass of objects crowed the left side of the town, signifying its occupation. The entire wave just came down on your side. Ian summarized. Have the Titans crossed over? They did try initially, but it looks like they're holding their position. Armin replied. Mitabi ordered you to run? Rico asked, looking down solemnly. Yes. I'm sorry. Armin apologized. Don't apologize. Rico replied, a stern to her voice as she continued to look at the map. We just have to make sure we win this. Ian stated. We have to go for the attack. Klaus argued, we've already lost our left flank. If the enemy are now focusing attacking us, then they'll hit us again. No, we should still hold out. Nanaba argued back, we've lost the left side because of a surprise attack, but we're more fortified now. We can't guarantee that a targeted attack on any position can hold out either. Rico stated, we sit here then we run the risk of another attack breaking our defenses. What if that attack was their last one? Nanaba stated, I've monitored the Titan line around us, they're running out of Titans to even maintain the ring. So we're winning then even if we lost a section of our defenses. Rico questioned. I don't know, but they're not benefiting from this strategy. Nanaba clarified. If the Titans on the other side aren't crossing the river, then their orders must be to hold and narrow our operations. The Beast Titan could be goading us to openly attack or retake our position. Marlene commented. I think we should just hold. Ed spoke up, if we go for the attack then who knows the people we'd lose, we're suffered enough losses as is, so let's try keeping it to a minimum. If the Titans are running out of numbers then we have the advantage to launch our own attack. Claus argued. We can't afford them the time to regroup and dash. Suddenly there was a distant sound of thunder across the sky, near the location of the Beast Titan. What was that? Ed muttered, another shifter. There were 4 mugs, but I thought that must have been the cart Titans. Armin muttered. Suddenly a garrison troop dropped down from the wall. Captain Ian. They shouted, a 15-meter Titan is heading our direction. A 15-meter? Just one. Rico asked. It's carrying a hammer. The garrison troop panicked. A hammer? What? Ed replied. He ran towards the wall and ascended it to the top, Armin following him. As he reached the top he pulled out his telescope, spotting a small white humanoid shape in the distance, growing closer to them. As Ed peered through the scope he got a good view of it. Its entire body was covered in a white armor, revealing only its face through slits in its helmet. In its hand was a hammer, a long hammer. Is that a war hammer? Armin commented as he observed it too. The Titan stopped only halfway between them and the Titan line, placing them base of its hammer on the ground as it stared at the town. Watching them, it lifted its hammer off the ground before slamming it back down. Not a second later large thorny white spikes burst from the ground as buildings were split in half and the artillery positions were knocked over or destroyed. It's aiming for the artillery positions, yelled one of the scouts. Everyone move now, yelled one of the garrison troops, as a flurry of troops began to move inwards. How the hell? Ed muttered, watching stunned. How can it? The rest of the officers stood on the wall watching it. White spike pillars broke through the ground and completely disrupted their outer line. Chapter 50, Enemy's Ace. 15 minutes before. War Chief Jaeger. The Warhammer Titan spoke, just behind the Beast Titan. The beast turned its head slightly to see the figure of a 15-meter tall Titan in clear white skin just behind its left shoulder, shielding itself from the view of the others. Lord Tiber. The beast replied, it is a great honor to meet you and an even greater honor that you would join us here in combat. The fate of Marley and perhaps the rest of the world may rest upon who becomes victorious in this battle. To sit out on this would be costly to everyone. The Warhammer replied. That being said, the Tiber family will not risk our Titan else it fall into our enemies' hands, the devils of Paradise or otherwise. Understandable. Zeke replied. He looked back at the village ahead, still firing shells at them and fortifying their position. Our enemy appears to remain settled in their position, content with just bleed us out. They have modern artillery? Interesting, the Warhammer observed as a shot struck one of the Titans in the line, cutting them into pieces. Possibly thanks to those Elric brothers. Zeke replied. Pests, demonic creatures. The Warhammer spoke. No divine deity, no gods, would aid those behind the walls and threaten all of life. Truly only the devil would seek to aid them. They're alchemists, scientists, not angels or demons. Zeke replied. It matters not what they are, only that they are tools for our enemy. The Warhammer brushed off. Lord Tiber, I need you to destroy their defenses and keep them occupied while Pike and I shuffle ourselves around for our next move. Currently we can't move on to the next part of our plan with their incessant cannon shots. I understand. The Warhammer responded. If time is what you need to win, then I shall give you plenty of it. Be careful of our enemies' weapons, who know what else they may have up their sleeve. Zeke advised. I assure you, whatever or whomever stands in my way will be destroyed. The Warhammer replied as it began to walk off, a long string connected to its foot. Titan shifters or alchemists. Focus your fire on that Titan. Ian ordered, his voice straining as his voice tried to stretch across the battlefield. Move the outer artillery inwards. A chaotic rush of people flying and running around occupied the space and the noise as a white 15-meter Titan armed with a long warhammer continued to slowly approach them. Team 1 and 2, reinforce the front and distract that Titan, hold it off for the artillery to reposition. A couple of scouts and garrison troops zipped over the cover as they flew straight towards the 15-meter Titan. The Titan drops the warhammer from its hand with a loud thud, holding its hand in the air. A bright light, like it was hold a glowing moon, emanated from its hand as a loud cracking so like glass shattering echoed and a crossbow took form in its hand. It pointed the crossbow straight down. Ian reacted quickly. Get down. He commanded. It wasn't a singular bolt which was fired off the crossbow, instead multiple shots were fired across all at once. The bolts tore through the buildings, ripping them to pieces and throwing the immediate counter-attack into complete disarray as a bolt strikes the wall and almost breaks through. The wall rumbles, causing everyone on it to stumble slightly. Fall back. Get to cover. He ordered. People begin to fall back to the barrier or hide behind the rubble as they brace themselves for another attack. The Titan continues to watch them, its crossbow facing the floor unconcerned by anything they could do to it. Both Armin and Ed fall back to the wall helping others jump over carrying wounded seeking cover. That thing, is it using alchemy? Ian questioned, his eyes still on the Titan. No, that's nothing I've ever seen. Ed replied as he dusted himself off. Armin could only look at the thing, his eyes nailed to the Titan and his face an expression of confusion and terror. Ed, is that Titan using the stone dash? No. Ed stated, it's not. I know alchemy when I see it and that thing isn't using alchemy. Ed pointed his finger at it. Whatever the hell that thing is, it shouldn't be able to do that, there's no way. Whatever it is, it's tearing through our defenses. Rico stated, we need to do something about it and quick. Captain Ian, Armin called out, Ed and I could distract the Titan long enough for the artillery to launch an attack. Could you? Rico asked. We'll try and keep it from wrecking the place further. Ed replied, just get the cannons in position. Do what you can. Ian ordered them, they both nodded their head as they jumped off, zipping towards the Titan. Rico, pass the word out to reposition towards the Titan, hurry. Yes, Captain. Rico replied, she jumped off the wall and swung away. Ian continued to watch the Titan, slowly turning its head as it seemed to survey its surroundings yet still with an air of confidence, like it felt it was untouchable. It began to step forward slightly and further approach the town, its crossbow still facing the ground. As it stood just 30 meters away from the outskirts of the village, The ground behind it began to shake slightly as a fist of brownstone erupted from the ground and struck the Titan in the stomach, breaking upon impact in a pile of rocks and dirt, pushing the Titan back slightly. A ball of fire then struck the Titan's face. The Titan waved its hands around as a cloud of smoke engulfed its face, dropping the crossbow onto the ground. Demonic creatures! The Titan yelled out, in a slight raspy echo to its voice. It talked. Ian muttered, "The Titan, it talks." The Titan takes a few steps back as its face was still covered in smoke, blinding it. Snapping out of his shock, Ian points at the Titan. "Now! Fire!" The Titan raises its hand upwards to its face. A familiar crackling sound echoed as a shining light like the sun reflecting off a mirror shone and a pale shield began to form in its empty hand. A scattered fire of artillery struck the Titan, the shells striking the shield to an explosion of orange and yellow light as a lone shell struck its leg, exploding and forcing it onto one knee. As the smoke cleared, the shield which covered the Titan was a wreck of holes and dents, peering through one of the hole. The Titan clenches its hand into a fist and slams it into the ground. The artillery positions which fired upon it were quickly upended as a crystal white pillar burst from the ground, and it peered above the shield and shook its head from side to side, as if searching. "Show yourselves!" it challenged, "you monsters of demonic illusions." Trying to bait out Edward and Armin for a fight, Ian watched. "You little deceivers, you evil insects!" the Titan called out. The ground shook underneath the Titan as a stone fist burst from the ground once more and struck the Titan on the side of the face hard, causing it to stumble further. "Talk and see what happens," came a familiar angry voice. "Should have known," Ian muttered. He noticed the wound on the Titan's leg and the gaping holes in its shield. "This Titan is still vulnerable to our attacks, we can still win this." Huddled around the ruins and remaining standing buildings of the district, what was left of Hang, Dirk and Levi squads began to formulate a plan. Hang drew on the dirt with a stick in the dirt, a large stickman flanked by two smaller stickmen and swarmed by even smaller ones. "Let's go over this one more time," Hang stated. "Alphonse, you need to stop the Colossal in its tracks for just a couple seconds for this to work." "I think I've got an idea on how to do that, so leave that to me," Alphonse replied, raising his arm up slightly to everyone. "My squad will fight Thunder Spears at the Achilles, Aaron, and Mina. When the Colossal Titan is in place, you need to strike at its Achilles tendon, cut into it as deep as you possibly can. Dirk's squad will hit the Titan behind the knees with the Thunder Spears, with any hope the damage done to its tendons will force it to collapse onto its knees. Hang then pointed to Petra. Levi's squad will then go for the kill when the Colossal has fallen, giving you what should be our best chance to kill Berthold." "Right," Petra replied. "But what if Reiner shows up?" Jean asked, concerned. "We still don't know where he is or if he's alive or just stuck somewhere. If Reiner shows up, then we'll have to split up our forces. The closest squad and Titan Shifter will have to." Hang stated, "Hypothetically we could achieve this with one squad alone, but we'd need everyone to pull it off quickly or at least before Berthold catches on to our plan. Less people could mean more time and more risk, so for now all hands will focus on taking down the Colossal before it reaches the wall. Everyone form up into your teams and prepare to move. Mina and Hang's squad are heading left, Dirk's squad and Aaron will move right and Levi's squad goes straight." Petra commanded, "Move between the buildings, 10 meters apart and don't let the Colossal spot our numbers." The squads quickly began to move and disperse across the district as they made their own way towards the Colossal Titan, quickly and swiftly moving between the buildings and ruins approaching the Colossal Titan. Mina crept through the rubble as the scouts of Hang's squad continued to move through the district. The smoke from the initial explosion of the Colossal had now cleared and the Titan was now in clear view. They kept a watchful eye on it, hiding between the rubble if Berthold had so much as turned his head at their direction. "We're close now," Hang stated as she landed onto Mina's shoulder. They felt the rumble of the Colossal's footsteps as they moved around. Moblet watched the others through his telescope as he signaled to the rest of his squad to keep moving. As they approached the Colossal Titan, just a couple houses away from its path, a bolt of lightning struck the ground a couple streets behind them. They all turned back. A defiant deep roar rang through the air. The Colossal Titan turned its head around, catching sight of them and the others. As it turned, its eyes lingered on Mina for just a few seconds before it let out its own cry. "Damn it!" Hang exclaimed as she reached over to her flare gun. Squads Dirk and Levi, continue the plan. My squad moved towards the armored titan. She commanded, firing the flare off towards the direction of the armored titan. Mina took one glance back towards the colossal titan, catching it staring at her before it turned its head back and continued to walk away towards the wall. She and Hang's squad began to race towards Reiner. Even inside the layers of muscle she was anxious and scared by the prospect of battling Reiner, even with the support of Hang and her squad. In the distance, Reiner began to run away from them, moving through the rubble as Hang's squad gave chase. What the hell is he doing? Nifa questioned watching him run from them. Think he's trying to avoid us? Maybe he's trying to dodge our thunder spears. Moblet suggested. We're not even close enough to hit him. Hang replied, sitting on Mina's shoulder as she continued to give chase. He must think that forcing us to split our forces will hurt us. Hang rubbed her chin, but if that's the case. She looked up. Another barrel soared through the sky, passing over the colossal titan. Titan above. Hang yelled out, everyone take cover. Her squad scattered around into the different houses as Mina knelt down and hid. The barrel exploded into a mass of bright white light as a titan, possible 5 or 7 meters tall, fell onto the ground, a couple streets behind the main attack. Damn it! Hang muttered angrily, knowing the danger now posed. She took out her flare gun and fired it in the direction of the new titan. Nifa, tell Dirk's squad to head to that position and neutralize the titan. We'll go support them. What about the armored titan? Moblet asked, turning back to face the armored titan who now vanished from sight. Hang was silent, no doubt deliberating over the decision. Mina. She called out. Hang hopped onto a nearby roof and looked at her. Listen, I know you're new to this, but we're gonna have to depend on you to handle Reiner here, if only just to buy us time to handle this new titan. Even inside her titan, it must have been clear to everyone how anxious she was. Maybe the titan copied everything down to the expression of fear on her face. Just keep him occupied, we'll be back to help you as soon as we can. Hang tried to reassure Mina. Squad leader, Dirk's squad looks to be heading towards the new target. Moblet stated as he watched through his telescope. Good luck, Mina. Hang said. She turned back to the rest of the squad, ordering them to move, leaving Mina alone to face Reiner. Alphonse hopped over onto the other building. He turned back to see the dying smoke of the red flares as they pointed towards the directions of the Titan shifters entering the battle. It's just us now. He spotted the other members of his squad zipping around the colossal like small flies hovering around someone's legs. Hang said that only a squad of us could possibly take down the colossal, but our chance of doing this quickly is almost gone. He turned towards the direction of Hang's squad. He gripped the top of his collar tightly as he sighed. He looked back at the colossal titan as it continued to walk towards the wall. He looked down at its legs as he thought about how he could halt its advance. A giant spike through the stomach? No, that would take too long. He fired his hooks onto a nearby building as he stared at the legs of the colossal titan, its feet breaking into the large road. A trap. He watched the pattern of the footsteps, watching when the feet would both touch the ground and for how long. I have an idea. He burst forward ahead of the colossal titan's path, blasting onwards and cutting inside onto the street. He came face to face against the colossal. It wasn't that long ago, I froze when coming close to that titan in Trost. He thought back to that encounter, Armin's plan to get the cadets out of the district and how close he came to one. Now he stood before the colossal titan, the rumble of its footsteps shaking his body as he held firm. His eyes drifted to the side of the road as he spotted his teammates lurking around the ruins and Aaron just behind Berthold. He turned back to the colossal titan and watched for that moment, 2 feet on the ground. He pressed his hands together in anticipation. Before the large foot of the colossal titan pressed into the ground, Alphonse slammed his hands into the ground as a massive caltrop formed from the ground as the colossal stepped on it, the titan stumbling slightly as it is halted in its tracks. He spotted the others, beginning to make their moves as Aaron came in from behind the titan to aim for its Achilles. With his hands still on the ground, Alphonse formed more traps holding down the colossal's feet in place. The colossal labored as it tried to escape. Alphonse once more clapped his hands together and placed them onto the ground. The floor underneath him began to elevate as the pavement and dirt was lifted upwards, receding around the thin tower until it reached the estimate height of the colossal titan, catching Berthold's attention. Kneeling down, Alphonse checked his equipment, his ODM and fuel tanks gear while he began to attach the thunder spear. He lifted his head up to look at the colossal staring at him and the colossal-sized pillar standing in his way. Petra and I have one shot at this. Aim for the neck and hit him with the spears. If it works it'll save Ed, Armin, and the others of the other side. He gripped the handle of the ODM gear which had the thunder spear attached to it. I don't understand why you're doing this, Berthold, but whatever orders you have or whatever reason you have, we'll do what we have to protect the others. Alphonse stood up. For just a second he felt like a giant as the cool breeze of the sky's air pushed against him. Berthold! Alphonse yelled at the colossal titan, straining his voice to its limit. I killed Annie, me. I fed her to a titan, you want to avenge her? Then come at me, I'm right here. He hoped that his bold declaration would keep the colossal titan's attention on him. The colossal titan stared at him for a second before leaning forward, dropping its jaw, and letting out a deep, shaking and visceral scream which seemed to ring around the district. Petra watched as the colossal titan continued to roar at Alphonse. Her eyes drifted down towards her squad members as they moved into position. She raised her hand up slightly as they watched her. Pointing outwards towards the colossal's legs, Connie and Sasha burst forward from the rooftops as they fired their hooks onto the calves of the titan, reeling forward and firing their spears towards the ankles of the colossal titan. There was a loud explosion as the spears burst, destroying the back of its feet as both Connie and Sasha flew away. Aaron! Petra yelled, pointing at their target. Aaron's titan charged forward, passing by her. She caught the familiar sound of crackling crystal being formed and the hint of light gleaming. Aaron pulled back his fist and struck it deep into the open wounds of the colossal titan, ripping and tearing through the muscle and flesh on one foot and quickly turning towards the other. The colossal titan slowly shifted its head downwards towards Aaron, who was ripping at the insides of its feet. Jean, Mikasa! Petra commanded, go now. They sprang from the walls and fired their hooks onto the leg joint of the colossal titan, pulling themselves forward and firing their spears behind the knees before pulling away, the explosions bursting its legs before the colossal titan could react to their attack. He's picked up on our attack. The colossal titan slowly began to fall forward. Like a great tower collapsing, the titan fell down to its knees, the force of impact destroying anything nearby as the titan then landed onto its hands to stop itself from falling flat on its face. A large cloud of ash, smoke, and dust clouded around it. Petra reached for her flare and raised it to the air, pulling the trigger as a red flare was shot into the sky. Our turn. She dropped her flare onto the roof of the building as she fired her hooks onto the colossal titan, bursting forward and swinging around the body of the titan towards its back, scaling the colossus. The heat for the titan pressing against her as she moved towards the nape, the sound of distant hooks and cables zipping around caught her attention as she spotted Alphonse moving to the nape too. She fired her hooks at the nape of the colossal and swung upwards, Alphonse copying her movements. They fired their hooks onto the nape of the colossal titan and zoomed down towards the nape, pointing their spears at the nape. Now! Petra yelled. She pulled the release, the spears shot towards the nape. As the spears soared, the colossal titan, still and weak, burst into a violent cloud of hot smoke. Blowing them back, their hooks quickly detaching from the nape and their thunder spears thrown into the other direction, their direction. Petra saw the spears thrown into their direction, the latches to their spears still attached. She gripped the handles to her ODM gear and threw herself towards Alphonse as she grabs him and pushing him to the side as the thunder spears shoot past them just barely. The latches attached to the spears breaks off, the explosion almost consuming them as the heat of the flames scorches her cape and the force pushed against her. She pulled at the trigger of her ODM gear still and sends off, falling towards the roofs of a nearby house. Petra gripped the trigger of her handle tightly, trying to slow their descent as they crashed into the roof. Petra! Alphonse! Came a yell as they both slammed into the tiles. Petra skidded to the side. Her head falling to see Alphonse lying on the tiles, his eyes closed as her own eyes began heavy. Before she shut them, she caught a glimpse of her squad reaching them, tending to Alphonse and then rushing towards her. Lieutenant! One yelled, she didn't know who. Petra! Someone help! Alphonse! Another yelled, get them out of here! Mina ducked her head below the level of the roofs as she stalked Reiner, who continued to move away, her hands gripped into a fist as she slowly moved along the blocks of houses. Reiner then stops, standing still. Mina continues to watch. Suddenly the sound of a boom and a deep rumble catches her attention as she turns to see the colossal titan falls to its knees. They're doing it. Suddenly the house that she hid behind was smashed to pieces, rubble flying around as she herself was rammed to the side from a rampaging force which burst through the house on the other side. Mina was flung to the floor, crashing into the ruins of the street of houses. She quickly moves her head upwards to see the armored titan, Reiner, standing tall, looking down at her as it stood over the house it destroyed. Reiner watched her for a few seconds before sounding out a loud roar, vicious and deep, into the sky like a wounded animal, his fists clenched as he moved into a running stance in her direction. Mina quickly got up from the ground as Reiner began to charge towards her. She threw herself to the side, crashing onto the overgrown cobblestone streets as Reiner passes by her, only just by mere meters. He plants his feet into the ground to slow his charge. Mina gets up from the ground again, placing her hands above her face, her fists clenched with crystal gleaming off it, standing up a fighting stance she was taught in her years during the 104th Corps. Reiner turned his head back towards her, steam seeping through his mouth with every breath the armored titan took. He walked towards her and around her like a predator circling its prey trying to find an opportunity to strike. Reiner stopped and then charged towards her again. Mina dodges, stepping to the side and then swinging at the side of Reiner's body, pushing off balance slightly and sending him stumbling to the side. She moved in and began swinging at Reiner, hitting his stomach, his chest, and then his face, his armor cracking with each punch. She swung her fist again. Reiner grabbed her fist with his hand, crushing the crystal lizard fist in his hand. Mina tugged at her trapped hand before trying go for another hit with her free hand. Instead, in her deliberation, Reiner struck fist, throwing a punch into her chest which ripped her from her trapped hand and sent her flying into a pile of destroyed house. Her hand missing, replaced by a smoking stub, and her chest releasing clouds of smoke into the air, her titan's body doing what it can to repair itself. As she lay onto the ground, dazed and battered, she could only think in both fear and frustration. Hit after hit, I couldn't beat him down, one hit and I'm sent flying. Mina stands back up, back slightly hunched as she faced down Reiner, walking confidently towards her, his footsteps heavy, crushing anything beneath him. Mina lifted up her one hand while tucking her stub close to her body as if to shield herself. I'll have to change my titan if I had to. She focused on her remaining hand, a thicker layer of crystal forming on the knuckles of the hand as Reiner prepared once more to charge towards her, the ground scraping underneath his feet as Mina began to dig in and stand her ground. Mina stared him down, scared but determined. In an act of defiance she yelled out towards him, her roar echoing out. Reiner charged toward her once more and she moved forward and swung her fist aiming for his face. Keep your eyes open, stick to the rooftops. Hang ordered as her and Dirk's squad arrived at the location of the third enemy titan. Report back anything you find. The scouts spreading across the area in teams as they surveyed the surrounds searching for the titan. Hang hopped across the nearby roofs. She turned towards the colossal titan, spotting the large pillar which stood in its path. In the distance she heard the roar of the colossal titan. Everything is in full swing, she thought to herself. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Separated and battling on multiple fronts as their numbers are being spread thin. To think, of all our advantages. She thought back to the appearance of the new titan. The image of a 5 or 4 meter titan falling to the ground played in her mind. She immediately thought back to Emir's titan, a titan with a similar height. Is Emir back? Is she working with them now? No, she quickly remembered the transfer of the female titan from Annie to Mina. Who's to say they didn't already do that? Despite the roaring battles occurring around them, the operation to take down the colossal titan, the clash between Mina and Reiner's titans and the distant echo of cannons from outside, the area was quiet. Hang felt uneasy. If we're facing Emir's titan, then it's going to be a struggle to use the spears. Squad leader. Moblet called out behind her. She turned her head to face him. Moblet. Hang replied. You find anything? Some of Dirk's squad might have found the landing area of the titan. There's some debris leading to a trail on the left, but it stops immediately. Moblet explained. Nifa and her team are continuing the search from there. You think the titan is on its way to supporting another one of their allies? Hang asked. It looks like it. Perhaps we should split back towards either supporting Mina or Levi's squad. Moblet advised. Still though, the best move is to do what's happening now. splitting our forces and picking us off. Hang continued, "It's like we're walking into an ambush and the Titan is just waiting for us." "Squad leader, should we dash?" The sound of gunshots interrupted Moblet as they quickly turned their heads towards the direction of the flares. The echoes of buildings being torn apart and people shouting and crying out caught their attention. "Who was that?" yelled one of the scouts. "That was Team 4. yelled another. "Where's the Titan?" a third yelled. There was a soft gallop, then another series of cries and yells followed by an explosion before everything went quiet. Hang quickly reached for her flare gun as she fired it into the air. "It's picking us off!" she yelled out. Everyone rallied together, 20-meter spread. The scouts quickly rallied around Hang. As she watched, the sound of hard thudding behind her caught her attention, like an oversized cat climbing a wall. She and Moblet turned their heads to see a Titan with large teeth and an oversized jaw, long blonde hair and crystal-like claws climbing and reaching out. The Titan pounced at them. Both Hang and Moblet quickly ducked to the side, just narrowly avoiding the gaping jaws of the Titan. Nearby scouts quickly fired onto the Titan, aiming their spears any part of the Titan's body. The Titan evaded the attacks as the spears struck the buildings and the ground. The latches pulled as explosions almost engulfed the Titan. More scouts attempted to swarm the Titan, firing their hooks onto the monster, but were thrown to the side as the Titan, into the side of buildings or splattering into the floor. Hang could only watch as the Titan ran circles around them, too quick for them to effectively strike and fully aware of how they operate. "All teams go on the defensive," Hang ordered. "Stalk the Titan, do not chase. If we can't catch you, then you'll have to get us." Hang darted and swung her way towards the Titan, just meters behind it as the scouts continued to play cat and mouse with it. The Titan would chase some scouts as others tailed it, their thunder spears explosions just nipping at its heels as the Titan just barely escapes their attacks, tearing apart the retreating scouts. Hang stops onto the roof of a house and kneels down, watching frustrated as they tried to outsmart the Titan to make up for its speed and agility. Hang reached into her front pocket, picking out a piece of chalk. She placed it on the tile of the house as she began to draw the outline of a circle, taking her eye off the Titan for just a few seconds to fill in the details. "If I can make a stand, distract it, then I'll give the others a chance." "Hang!" Moblet yelled, straining his voice. Hang lifted her head up for a second as the edge of the roof she stood on was burst open, the Titan underneath her raising over her as her and parts of the house came falling down. She grips the handle of one of her ODM gear, the gas slowing her descent into the floor. As she crashed onto the floor, the debris of the house and roof fell onto of her. She raised one arm to her face. Before everything went black. Check the description for the links to the author.